Welcome to MELfeed.video. We are commencing a live web stream service via youtube.com from Melbourne, Australia. We currently conduct these streams mainly on Wednesday evenings, with other times to be added as more opportunities arise. Please visit our website at MELfeed.video for further information. This web video project presents old and new community TV programs. Please enjoy your stay with MELfeed.video.
Hi, this is Michael Costello from MELfeed.video. Welcome to our special Thursday night transmission on Thursday the 31st of May. Unfortunately, we missed our transmission last night on Wednesday the 30th of May due to various reasons, but we're here with you tonight on a special Thursday night edition. So please join us for the programs you would have seen last night tonight, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you. Bye.
Welcome to NAT Chat. I'm Paul Spanos, and our guest again this week is Kay Harrison, a singer and a songwriter. Kay, welcome back.
Thank you.
When was the first time that you did write a song?
I've been writing since I was a tiny girl, so I always had a need to express myself on paper. I wrote poetry, I wrote thoughts. I was very, very good at English in school, so I used to get pretty good marks for my poems. But as I grew older, I began to write secular music because I was in the secular music scene at the time. And in fact, I had a measure of success. I wrote some music that was bought by Channel 10 and was used for quite a few years. And the royalties that I received from the sale of those songs have enabled me to do the albums that I've done for the Lord today.
And in other words, this is another, it's a language for you, expressing what you believe. And
that's right. But what I used to write about, it's changed. Obviously, when I became a Christian, what changed for me was my entire life. What was important to me, there was a major shift. And so, you know, I don't think it's just about writing, but it's about what I felt was worth writing about. And I found something in Jesus that I couldn't put a lid on that. I had a compulsion to write about my faith, and also about the experiences that I observed other people having as well.
Returning to the subject of persecution, it is not an easy subject to deal with. One sad story after the other. And it is difficult to keep yourself into that mode. How do you motivate yourself?
Well, the simple answer is that I don't motivate myself. I think I'm definitely inspired and spurred on by the courage that I see in the people who love Jesus Christ and who take these really tough stands. I also know without a doubt that it's God working in me. If God gives you a job, I really believe he will also enable you to actually do it, to do the job. And it is a job in one sense, but it's more than that for me. It's a call. And in the last couple of lines of my song, Hidden in Jesus, there's a couple of lines there that says, I'm drawn to his suffering. I'm drawn by his will. So for me, it is a drawing, and I want to make use of everything that I've gone through in my life for the glory of God. Really, that's what I believe my life is about.
Are you talking about drawn to his suffering, talking about Christ himself?
That's right, absolutely. Because when I see a suffering Christian who's suffering specifically because they will not recant their faith in Jesus Christ, I see the sufferings of my Lord. I can't separate the two for me. I see that they are suffering because they love him. He suffered because he loves us. So there's that relationship.
This faith empowers you, in other words, and you keep going into this subject.
Absolutely. And I can tell you now that, look, I'm a grandmother, I'm a mother, I'm a wife. I am no different to any other human being. When I see suffering, of course, it's terrible. And at a human level, I can get very overwhelmed, very overwhelmed. But I come back to why. Why are they suffering? I come back to the purpose of their pain. And the purpose of their pain is Jesus Christ. And he considered us worth dying for. They consider him worth dying for. So that spurs me on, and I think that injects into me a renewed strength every time I feel my courage failing me.
The numbers of Christians persecuted every year is staggering. Exceed 150,000. So talking about this, do people listen to that message?
Do people listen? I actually think...
Message, do they listen to about the persecuted?
I don't think too many people even know about the persecuted, Paul. And I say that I'm not talking about people outside the church. I'm talking about even Christians. Many churches and many Christians are very ignorant about the suffering of their own people. Now, it may be lack of information, lack of knowledge, but in some cases, it's been my experience, it's also been lack of desire and lack of desire to actually know what is really going on. And, you know, we know right now as we sit here, Syria has become a slaughter yard for minority groups, more specifically Christians, who are being murdered. And they're being murdered by the dozens a day in Syria right now. We have a sister that's awaiting a death sentence in Sudan. She's pregnant, 8 months pregnant. She's been sentenced to death because she will not recant her faith in Christ. She is due to be hung in a few weeks' time.
Okay.
These are just examples now, and, you know, I could go on. They're just simple examples of what's happening.
Having the job and carrying that burden in you, what sort of connection between your singing and their suffering? In what I'm saying, what do they get from your singing?
I think
those who suffer. I'm talking about the persecuted.
Yes, for the persecuted themselves, because obviously I'm writing the songs from different perspectives. Some are from the perspective of myself as I look at them. Some are from their perspective. And some of the songs have been written as messages from the suffering church to the world, to the free world, and to Christians who live in the West.
Okay.
So some of them are from the Lord himself, which are taken from the Word. But what is it doing for them? I think the primary thing that it communicates to them, and this is what's come back to me from Pakistan, is that somebody cared enough, that somebody was moved and touched enough by their suffering, and has the love of God in their hearts, and it's only by God's grace that I do, that they wanted to actually use all their resources to make their suffering known, and not just to make their suffering known, but to make their suffering known in a way that people will understand why they're suffering.
It means that you're singing and the subject that you deal with to their ears is a comforting.
I think it is, based on what has come back to me. Our direct ministry to Pakistan, we receive many emails, and I get phone calls from Pakistan on a regular basis from the pastor that I'm connected with directly. And they are deeply moved and deeply encouraged by the fact that not only is this album raising funds, money that goes directly to them and helps them in so many ways, but that somebody cares, somebody loves them, someone who's never even met them. That's the work of God. This is the way God's body works.
And if you, because obviously you have a communication with them.
Absolutely.
A question comes to my mind is, what if you ask them what they want to say to a person like me in Australia who doesn't know anything about persecution, and I don't even feel it, to be honest. What do you think they're saying? They want, if I ask him, what they're going to say to me?
Well, you know what's really interesting about the people I deal with in Pakistan? None of them complain about the persecution. I've never heard one word of complaint. All I've heard from them is, sister, please pray for us, that God will sustain us so that we can be faithful to him. And I think their message to us here in the West is, stand up for him, because if you do not stand up for him and stand up for your faith, you will fall for everything. They stand up, and they actually seal that with their lives in many instances. The martyr's heart is there, and whether you die for Jesus or not, you must live for him. But there always must be in the heart of a martyr, and that's what we see, the willingness to lay down one's life, if that's asked of you.
By the sounds of it, I can't see in your answer any political motivation message. Do you think this is the same as in the first century, because the persecution pretty much is...
The Christian church is just bathed in the blood of the saints and of the martyrs, of those who stood. We're starting from Jesus himself, you know, through to Paul, to Stephen, of course. John the Baptist was beheaded. Anybody who stood for truth and made no compromise were cut down. And that has not changed, except that we're seeing more dying for their faith in Jesus today than at ever any other time in history.
Thank you, Kay. We'll be back shortly after the break. Continue the interview with Kay Harrison.
Sport is for everyone.
No matter who you are or where you're from.
There's no place for discrimination in sport.
And everyone should feel welcome, safe,
respected and get a fair go.
Whether you're a player, a spectator, a coach or an official.
What do you want from your sport?
Are you ready to make a difference?
Sport is for everyone.
And everyone starts with you.
Keep your sport inclusive,
safe, fair and fun.
For more information, go to playbytherules.net.au.
1 in 5 of us are affected.
10% of us will have at least one.
And the numbers double for Indigenous Australians.
Just as quick as a click of your fingers, it can happen to anyone at any time.
What would you do if someone close to you was having a seizure?
Imagine if it was your child.
My brother has it. My sister has it.
I have it.
I have it too.
You're not alone.
You're not different.
And you have a bright future ahead of you.
So click for kids.
I'm Amy Lee, and I'm part of it.
Hot water storage tanks can be a breeding ground for Legionnaire's disease bacteria. You can catch Legionnaire's disease by inhaling small droplets of infected water during showers or other activities. To prevent this from happening, you should never reduce the temperature setting. Tank temperature should be left as set by your plumber. Or eliminate the problem completely with a tankless gas hot water system. For more information, visit healthyhotwater.com.au.
Wednesday at 10 p.m. on MELfeed.video.
It was a dark and stormy night in a bar over a strawberry margarita. Steve and Jacqueline had time to kill, so they decided to slaughter it. The result, 15 fabulous minutes. You be the judge.
Welcome back to NAT Chat. I'm Paul Spanos, and we'll continue the interview with Kay Harrison to the topic of persecution. Kay, welcome back.
Thank you.
You have the album here. Is that now your major source of income or part of your job today?
No. No, the albums, in fact, this is my second album, my first album out of Egypt as well. It's still selling after all these years. And all the proceeds, all the profits from both of these albums, more specifically Church Under Fire, goes directly to the work of the persecuted church in Pakistan. Voice of the Martyrs Australia also sell this album on their website.
Okay.
And whatever they actually receive for that, they put into different projects worldwide. So I don't make a living out of this.
Okay,
no,
we're going to talk about the ministry in a minute. Then how do you make a living?
Well, I work during the day. I do quite a few what we call interactive singing groups. I facilitate singing groups for aged care persons in different facilities around Melbourne. I work for the RSL. They have a lot of nursing homes, returned soldiers and nurses from the Second World War. So I do quite a lot of work for VASI, RSL. I work also in the Jewish community as a private companion. I also do singing groups for a place in Melbourne called Monash, which is a lovely aged care facility for older Jewish people. And I've been involved in the Jewish community for well over a decade now. So
wow, you are into the community, all right?
Yes, and I guess, you know, you're talking about suffering and persecution. I've also had a heart, always had a heart for the Jewish people as a people. And it was always my desire at some point to work alongside the Jewish people and to show them the love that I always wanted to show them when I was a little girl, and I learned about what they'd gone through during Second World War. So now I say that I have some wonderful friends in that community as well, and I do quite a bit of work there.
Is your background Jewish?
No, not at all. No, but some of my best friends, closest friends from when I was very young are Jewish. I even named my second child after one of my closest Jewish friends.
There you go. What a connection. Talking about back to the ministry, can you give us some tangible examples how those funds go there, what is happening to those?
I think it's important for people to know that when we send money, my husband and I are both involved in this ministry, and it's a direct ministry to Pakistan. We send our money actually via Western Union. So it goes directly to the pastor and the pastoral team. And over the last few years in Pakistan, there have been many, many different types of persecution. And so many of our brothers and sisters have lost everything. They've lost everything, the blankets, food, medicines, household items that they desperately need, like fans. They also have little sort of containers called paities, where they have all of their most precious household items in, and they are usually fireproof, but they still get very damaged when a house is actually, you know, burned to the ground, and so we've been able to replace many of those. But I've made a list actually, Paul, of some of the projects that we're actually involved in at the moment. The money at the moment is going toward helping the completion of a church building near the brick kilns, so that the poorest of God's people there can worship God in a building. We're building a school. We're actually probably 2/3 of a way through building a school for the poorest children, the brick kilns, and they're being educated, which is fantastic. Prosthetic limbs, because many of them have lost limbs as a result of all kinds of hardship there. Life-saving medicines, Bibles. Bibles are very hard to come by in many persecuted lands, and it's the #1 thing that Christians cry out for. They want God's word. So we're able to provide that. We're able to educate the pastors' children. We're able to provide things like blankets, food, and of course all kinds of things that everyday, practical everyday things, as well as aiding them in their spiritual life, although I have to say they've got far more to offer me than I do.
Do you see that a persecuted family, apart from the tangible things, they fall into different temptations than otherwise they wouldn't fall into? Sort of because of the financial needs that they've got, they might be prone into falling into temptation of getting involved with anything just to get something to go by?
That's not been my experience. I can only speak from my experience, and more specifically with the direct ministry that we have to Pakistan. These people have a devout trust that God will provide. And it just doesn't seem to matter what's taken from them. And I can tell you, I have thousands and thousands of emails now, without exaggeration, in the 9 years. And they're just filled with thanksgiving to God. These emails are just filled with messages from suffering believers who want me to know and want us to know here in the West how grateful they are to God, that they have Jesus as their saviour, and that we care about them, and that we make communication with them, and that we're helping them. And I feel we're doing so little. I look at just the size of the issue of persecution. It's much bigger than me. It's much bigger than any of us. But I've got to do something. So I do what I can. I do what I can.
On an Aussie person, like an average Australian who hasn't been exposed into any of those stories other than listening here and there or television news, how that person can understand more or can feel more about those stories?
I think sometimes there is a tendency for people, perhaps, that, as you say, have not been exposed to this kind of violence for somebody's faith. They tend to fall into a category of thinking, oh look, it's just a whole bunch of different groups all infighting. We'll just leave it all to them. It's not until you get to know people on an individual level, once you hear their individual stories, once you see their pain and their suffering. I've witnessed executions of brothers and sisters in Christ. I've actually seen that, live footage. When Peshawar was bombed in Pakistan last year, when that church was bombed, several dozen men, women and children were blown to bits, and the footage from that bombing was sent directly to me by believers who were there at the time, because they were having lunch together and they had their cameras and they were filming one another. So, and having actually been exposed to that, once you start to know the names and the faces of individuals, their stories become personal. They touch your humanity. It's no longer something happening out there that you look at on the 6 o'clock news, but these are real people with real stories and who are really suffering.
Now, the subject of suffering doesn't make you weaker, because by the sounds of it, you give me sort of a different message. How do you feel about this? Does it make you weaker or stronger at the end of the day?
Well, Paul,
for me to be exposed, do I have any motivation to know more? Is it going to make me feel depressed more than...
That's an interesting question, you know, and if I'm being really brazenly honest, I think there are a lot of people here in Australia, and I'll be talking to people right now as I say this, who suffer with anxiety, depression, all kinds of things. So I've been a lifelong sufferer of depression and anxiety, and I have some massive anxiety bouts at times. It may not look like that on the outside, but I do. So I can really empathise with people who suffer silently inside, have to work really hard to overcome that. But what I'm really getting at here is that the suffering of God's people that I've been exposed to over the years has had a twofold effect on me. There have been times when I felt I wanted to run as far as I could in the opposite direction, because what I've seen has been so horrifying. And even now, as I sit here, just 2 days ago, I witnessed the atrocities that are happening in Syria. through some footage that was sent through.
Yes.
I didn't sleep all night.
Yes.
I cried for hours.
Yes.
I prayed.
Yes.
And just begged God to intervene on their behalf.
Okay.
So in that sense, it put the fear of God into me. I was afraid when I saw that. And I sit there on my bed and I ask myself, how would I respond in that situation? Would I still be able to love my enemies? Would I still be able to say I love my Lord even though it seems like he's left me, he's abandoned me, he's forsaken me? But you know, it's strengthened me because I know as I look at the Bible and as I read what God himself said, when Jesus was on this earth, he told us these things would happen. And seeing these things actually happening in the lives of people who love him that much that they are willing, even though it's a terrible price to pay, they know, they are convinced that this is not it. They're convinced that they have a life that goes on beyond the grave. And you know, their suffering has changed my Christianity. I am not the Christian woman I would have been had I not been exposed to the persecuted church and that ministry. And I thank God for that.
But in that sense, I can see that has made you a stronger Christian in realistic sort of terms of all of that, what implies.
It's made me more tender, but it's made me stronger. So you have this kind of almost seeming paradox there.
Yes.
And I think that the thing that it's really done for me really is it's made me understand the difference between cultural Christianity and true faith in Christ.
Okay, I can see not only the title of the album here, Church Under Fire. You are under fire indeed. And
I am.
And thanks for coming with your passion. And
thank you.
Thanks for coming with your conviction. And for our audience, thank you for being with us with this interview with Kay Harrison. And after the break, we're going to have the song Church Under Fire.
Playing the 80s on Air FM 88.0.
Hi, this is Darren McAlane from Air FM Drive. Join me from 3 to 6 p.m. every afternoon on 88.0 in Penrith, and also you can catch me on tunein.com. That's from 3 to 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time.
Playing the 80s on Air FM 88.0.
Hi, I'm Lane Beachley. Australians have recycled enough printer cartridges to cover Bondi Beach 12 times. That's kept 11,000 tonnes of valuable resources out of landfill. Drop your used original cartridges into the special boxes at participating retail outlets, and they'll be turned into new products from pens to road surfaces. Help us keep up the good work. Find out more at cartridges.planetarc.org.
Every day, in many ways, the Royal Flying Doctor Service takes the finest care to Australia's furthest corners so that all Australians can enjoy the best of health. The Royal Flying Doctor Service has been taking care of Australians for over 80 years. But we still need your help to continue providing emergency rescue and essential health care to remote and rural communities. Make a donation or become a supporter and help keep the Flying Doctor flying.
Here I am, thinking of the faces, all the people and the places I have never seen. But still I know that we are blood related, and your pain is not outdated. For you are saturated in His love. Church under fire, you don't shrink back. You keep on walking, you keep on talking. Church under fire, you have no land Father, walk upon this earth daily knowing what He's worth. You know you lose. You've lost a lot, my sister. Ah, but look at what you got in Jesus, who is your treasure beyond any measure that I've known. Church under fire, you don't shrink back. You keep on walking, and you keep on talking. Church under fire, you have that so full of Jesus, Spirit's desire.
MELfeed.video.
Welcome to the CEC Report, the weekly program of political and economic analysis from the Citizens Electoral Council. I'm Robert Barwick, and I'm joined again by CEC founder and leader Craig Isherwood. Welcome, Craig.
Thanks, Robbie.
Today, we have a very important topic to discuss. It's what we have just exposed in the very latest edition of our publication, The New Citizen: Defeat the British Crown's Green Fascist Dictatorship. So today we're going to talk about how the British Crown created green fascism. Let me begin by talking about the environment. Care for the environment is the new creed of our society. It's like the 11th commandment. And you're not going to find anyone to argue with that. Of course, we should, care for the environment. But what does it mean? What we tend to see is that people who live in large cities, and especially school children, are fixated on this. But people in Australia who live in areas that are rural areas that are primarily there for production purposes, or people who work in industries that greenies oppose, tend to see the other side of environmentalism.
And pretty quickly.
Well, they quickly discover that what is called conservation has a very anti-human bent to it. And the bottom line is, conservation as it reigns today is just a cover for a vicious hatred of human activity that has one objective. And that objective, Craig, is population reduction.
And not just small population reduction. We're talking about the British Crown's deliberate and very public announcements that it intends to reduce the population from the current 7 billion down to below 1 billion people, which is really insane when you think about it. But this is the nature of the British Crown. And people will say, well, why would they want to do that? I mean, what on earth would possess them to do that? Now, this is not a new program as all of a sudden happened. This has been going on for the last 40 to 50 years as a deliberate program, and we'll say more about that in a minute. But what's at stake here? What the reason for it is that you have the British Crown and its adoption or its existence is as an oligarchy. It believes, the Queen and Prince Philip both believe that they are ordained by God, by the gods I should say.
The gods, yeah.
The gods, to reign over human beings of the world. And frankly what happens is that too many people become a threat to them because human beings are created in the image of what we call imago Dei. They're created with creative reason in the image of God, and that we have the ability to transform our environment through the use of science and technology. So therefore, if we promote the use of science and technology, if we promote education, if we actually really give human beings the capability to make discoveries of the universe, these oligarchs lose power.
Now, there's a metaphorical example of this. And the funny thing is, it may not just be metaphorical, but the story of the actual gods of Olympus and Zeus has a historical foundation. And Aeschylus wrote a trilogy, Prometheus Bound, where Prometheus was sort of like a dare I say it, a Christ character. He was a god and a mortal, and he defied Zeus. Zeus had said humans cannot have fire because of how it would help them to develop.
Which, that's sort of like a metaphor today for nuclear power.
That's right. So Prometheus stole fire, gave it to mankind, for which he was punished by the gods for the rest of time.
Yeah, he was chained to a rock and had an eagle come out every day and pick out his liver. I mean, you want to talk about nasty torture, but that actually captured the mindset of these oligarchs.
Because what Prometheus saw different to Zeus was that human beings had a potential to develop and should be able to, but Zeus knew that if they did, they would be less at the mercy of the gods. Now that's a metaphor, but we have printed in this paper actual newspaper headlines from Australian papers from the 60s and 70s where the Queen herself and Prince Philip, in his own words, have said, we need to stop scientific discovery.
And that's really awesome when you think about that, so many people believe that the Queen is or Prince Philip are harmless figures. He's a doddering old person. But he has been at the forefront of the creation of green fascism ever since the post-war period. Many people may not recognise that Hitler gave eugenics, the idea of getting rid of certain select groups of people, a bad name because of what he did to the Jews, the Gypsies and the Christians and the others in the gas chambers, right? So the word eugenics was given a bad name, but the eugenics was reinvented by the very same people that were pushing it into the idea of environmentalism.
Now, eugenics was always committed to the goal of population control and population reduction. So now environmentalism is based on that. Given that that's its intention, to actually reduce the numbers of human beings, we can't be surprised that the way the green movement operates is an actually fascist, with an actually fascist outlook. They are as fascist as the Nazis, etc. So I'll give a couple of examples, but to bring it home for Australians.
I think when we say fascist, it can be seen as a bit of a glib term,
Yeah,
but we're
yeah.
being very precise here. We are referring to people that deny that man is created in God's image, that man has this creative spark, and that man are nothing more than animals with a carrying capacity, that man is polluting the earth. This is the sort of fascist that we're talking about. And again, Hitler was created out of the green shirts movement, or the brown shirts movement was created out of the green shirts movement, the environmentalist movement in the 19s and 20s in Germany. If he didn't have that space of support, which again was supported by the oligarchy, then he wouldn't be able to exist in power.
We'll cover some of this a little bit further down today, but just from what you just said, consider this: the carbon tax, the Murray-Darling Basin Authority plan that we are leading the fight against, the media inquiry, which is a strange one because Bob Brown says, "Oh, you got to stop the Murdoch media," but they want to bring in rules for all the media,
which includes us.
Which includes us. Peer review behind climate change science. If it's not peer-reviewed, it's not real.
Peer-reviewed, as we call it.
Peer-reviewed, that's right. But what does that mean? That the people have to accept what an elite say, right? There can be nothing outside of that. And even the example where a well-known journalist in Australia, who I know in some respects is anti-fascist because she was a strong voice against John Howard's police state anti-terror laws, for example. When Al Gore's movie came out, and Inconvenient Truth, she called for climate change denial to be made a crime, like the Germans make Holocaust denial a crime, because she said the consequences will be another Holocaust and otherwise. In other words, you should not be allowed to deny these things. So these are examples of fascism. The people have to accept what this elite tell them is for their own good, which means going into that gas chamber in effect.
This is becoming really bad in the schools, because recently, you have this situation where a school in Queensland was given access to satellite tracking or satellite vision, where it was actually spying upon Borneo about the destruction of rainforests for the orangutan.
And they would call up.
This is spying on a sovereign country.
And they would call up feral eco-terrorists on the ground in Borneo to go and combat the locals who were doing this land clearing.
This is fascism. And school kids are being indoctrinated with this as a method.
Absolutely. All right, well, with that introduction, we have to take a break. When we come back, we're going to give you the history of this, just to give you a taste of what's in this paper.
Do you currently have a community service announcement on free-to-air television? If you do, you can now submit it to us as well via our website at MELfeed.video. We have lots of time to fill on these broadcasts, and we are sure to give your announcement a great run on MELfeed.video.
So, you think you're ready for this?
To take on the world? Why not?
Every minute.
Every hour.
Every mother and father.
Every sister and brother.
Every son and every daughter.
Everyone you see.
Everyone you cheer.
Everyone you watch.
And everyone you hear.
Everyone you meet.
Everyone you know.
Everyone you love.
Everyone is affected.
Reach out and get connected.
If you choose to text while driving,
you could ruin lives.
Someone else's, your family's, or your own.
Choose not to instead.
The right choice could save someone's life.
Proud supporters of safety in our community.
GMCU and Southern Cross Austereo.
Welcome back to the CEC Report, where we're discussing how the British Crown created green fascism. Now, Craig, the first thing people have to know is what the Crown is. It is the Queen and the royal family, but it's an institution, right? So we've recently, a couple of years ago, we printed an edition of our paper, that one there, if you want to hold it up. Defeat the British Empire of Monetarism, where we give the pedigree of the Crown. The British Crown is modelled on the Venetian system, and Venice was ruled over by a doge. That's a variation of the word duke. But the doge was elected. He didn't hand down his authority by hereditary. And he was answerable to the collective of the Venetian aristocracy, right? And from 1688 onwards, the British Crown was reworked on the same way, where the British royal family is the figurehead for the City of London. So it's a financier oligarchy.
Except they weren't elected, they were just imposed.
No, exactly.
Unfortunately.
But if the British Crown, back in 1994, when we first exposed the World Wildlife Fund through the Executive Intelligence Review magazine, LaRouche made the point that he called it the coming fall of the House of Windsor. If this royal family ceases to be useful to the oligarchy, they'll replace them.
Yeah.
Right? So at the moment, so what's the oligarchy want? That's the key thing here. Well, the model is the East India Company. And we go through the details of this in that paper, which people should look up. But the East India Company was the world's biggest ever private monopoly. It was the British Empire. The empire was based on the territory conquered by the company, and the British government represented the company in international affairs, such as the 1763 Treaty of Paris. And it was out of this East India Company, which was sort of Benjamin Disraeli, a British Prime Minister in the 1800s. He wrote about this Venetian takeover of Britain. His family was part of it, and he called it the Venetian Party. And the Venetian Party was centred in the East India Company. And it was the East India Company, Craig, that employed Thomas Malthus to write his political economic justification for genocide. And that's exactly what Malthus was about.
Which today comes down to the same policies: free trade and globalisation. And we hear about the Opium Wars, or the opium trade. That was run through the British East India Company. The slave trade, the British slave trade was initially run through the British East India Company. I mean, these are policies that have come down to us today. So when we talk about the free trade policies, the modern free trade policies, there's not one exact difference between these policies and these policies of the Venetian-sponsored British East India Company.
And from about the year 1800 on, the entire leadership of the East India Company was trained by Thomas Malthus.
Yep.
And that applied to the way they ran the Irish famine. They ran the Opium Wars, as you've said. They had Malthus's ideas. What were Malthus's ideas? They're the basis of the Green Movement. Malthus said, and he was wrong. He said that food supply will always grow, or population will always grow faster than food supply. He said what we've got to do is work out a way that for every baby born, there's a person who dies, because we have to keep the population static in that way. And it was from his ideas that Darwin came up with his notion of natural selection. Darwin's natural selection gave birth to the philosophy and ideas of eugenics. And this was the idea that natural selection has governed the evolution of species. Human beings need to work out a way to use the principles of natural selection on the human species so that genetically we advance, stay strong, etc. And famous people in Australia, like one of the, probably the guy who's regarded as our greatest ever scientist, Macfarlane Burnet, who advocated chemical and biological warfare against Asian countries to our north to reduce their population.
He was the guy that discovered myxomatosis for rabbits.
He's the guy who applied myxomatosis to rabbits.
Yeah, but he was trying to also talk about using that to Asian populations.
Exactly. What he did to rabbits, he wanted that to be done to Asian populations.
Yes, I mean, this guy was a real rabid eugenicist and a racist.
And if you read him, he was obsessed with this idea of perfecting the gene pool of human beings using Darwinian natural selection, i.e. eugenics, and he was the head of the Eugenics Society.
Wasn't he made an Order of Australia
a knight, and Prince Philip wrote the foreword to his book.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. So Darwin's eugenics begat Hitler, right? And as you've already said, it was Hitler who gave eugenics a bad name. So contemporaries of Hitler, British contemporaries of Hitler, Julian Huxley, Arthur Tansley, an absolute kook, and Nicholson, the head of the British Nature Conservancy, they were the people that Prince Philip organised together to start the green movement as we know it today through the World Wildlife Fund. And what we've done in this paper is take that on from there. The World Wildlife Fund has one objective, and Prince Philip is the guy who keeps saying what that objective is: population control, population reduction.
He'd love to come back as a deadly virus to make a contribution to overpopulation. He said that. That's his modus operandi. He's absolutely obsessed with this idea of population control.
Now, Craig, we've documented also how the World Wildlife Fund, if you look at its activities in Africa especially, is responsible for actual genocide, not theoretical genocide of, we're going to do this. They've been doing it already.
Well, that's right. I mean, because the point with the Africans is that they use the African conservation parks as ways of setting up conservation preserves, but they've also been guilty of sponsoring the literal assassination and killing of people in and around those areas. So, I mean, we go through in great detail in that and other New Citizens about the way that the World Wildlife Fund has used the conservation movement specifically to kill people. And it's very, very explicit. It's really quite shocking.
And in recent times, in the last couple of decades, there's been a number of exposés come out to show the way that the African people have been abused, absolutely abused in the name of conservation.
That's 10 pence in the panda, isn't it?
10 pence in the panda.
Yeah.
And the point is, though, when you watch it, what Australians have to realise is what's happening in the Murray-Darling Basin now.
Exactly the same.
Is exactly the same.
What's happening in the Murray-Darling Basin is the same land clearance process of Scottish Highlands, of African game parks, preserves, and of the Irish, and the Irish potato famine. It's the same modus operandi. There is absolutely no difference when you study history and you look at it, and it's the only difference, well, there's no difference. The singularity, it's the British Crown that's doing it, through the British, either through, in the early days, the British East India Company, but today it's directly done through the conservation movement, run by Prince Philip directly.
All right, so with that by way of background, when we come back, we're going to bring it home to Australia and talk about how it's working in how it was set up in Australia and how it's working here now.
If a man's home is his castle, his shed is his kingdom. It's a place men can hang out with a few mates, build a few things, even if you haven't before, and give back to the community. No man should be without a shed. The Australian Men's Shed Association is working to provide a shed for all Australian men, and they have over 400 already. Visit your local shed, build your community, and make a difference. Find a shed near you. It's time to give back.
Every new lion means 2 more hands. Join us, lions.org.au.
I was diagnosed with Parkinson's at 27.
I was 46.
I was 62.
The first symptom I noticed
was loss of balance.
Was that I was always tired.
Was a loss of smell.
The most difficult thing for me is not to be able to travel in my retirement.
The most difficult thing for me was giving up a career that I loved.
The hardest thing for my mum was being pregnant with me.
Wednesday at 10 p.m. on MELfeed.video.
It was a dark and stormy night in a bar over a strawberry margarita. Steve and Jacqueline had time to kill, so they decided to slaughter it. The result, 15 fabulous minutes. You be the judge.
Welcome back to the CEC's discussion of how the British Crown created green fascism. Now, Craig, when we talked recently about the Murray-Darling Basin and the fight there, we strongly suspect that when the Queen visited Australia in October for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, and she had her private meetings at Government House with Opposition Leader Tony Abbott and Prime Minister Gillard and whoever else, she discussed there the plan to shut down the Murray-Darling Basin. Now, that seems a rather outrageous thing to say. Why do we suspect that? Well, you've got to know the amazing story, the shocking story of how hands-on the royal family, Prince Philip and the Queen, were from the 1960s onward in creating the green movement in Australia.
And it's a story that's not being told, Robbie.
Except by us?
Except by us.
So we've documented it.
In
and when we
detail.
researched it, it blew us away.
Yeah.
Just to give you some of the overview, it was a royal tour in 1963 that Prince Philip said Australia needs a branch of my World Wildlife Fund. He ordered the Governor-General's permanent private secretary to organise it. And that guy's job, he used the resources of the Office of Governor-General to bring together big business, bring together the scientists like the CSIRO, etc., and create the Australian Conservation Foundation. Prince Philip ordered the Australian government to fund it. They got the Chief Justice of the High Court, Sir Garfield Barwick, no relation to me, to be its first president. And the reason they did that was so Barwick would have the maximum leverage over the government, because as the Justice of the High Court, governments had to try and get legislation past him.
And he used that influence.
He absolutely used that influence. And so between Prince Philip and Barwick, and of course Barwick's one of the highest ranking knights in Australia, a real favourite of the royal family, they set up the ACF, got it going, and then they deployed it as a weapon against the state governments. And that was important because state governments are in charge of the area that conservation falls under, right? And the first example was what they did to Tasmania, where they tried to stop the building of the Gordon Dam that flooded Lake Pedder, and they heavied the Tasmanian government in an extreme way, to the point where the Premier of Tasmania, Eric Rees, a real Australian patriot, had a shouting match with Prince Philip behind closed doors, right, back in 1972, an amazing story. These people are not figureheads. They use their power like bullies. What we talk about in here, Craig, though, as an aside, is their own analysis of the Crown's power. They call themselves the chameleon Crown. They just exist in the background so no one sees it, but they use it. Out of all this came the Wilderness Society, came the Greens Party of Bob Brown, came the Wentworth Group, which is the big group leading the Tim Flannery's outfit.
Of scientists behind all the promotion for the MDBA.
Scientists.
So-called scientists.
That all came out of everything Prince Philip did. And so now we've got things like, and it's the same people, you see them popping up all the time.
A small group, it's just not a mass, it's just a very small group, extremely well funded.
We first came across Tim Flannery back in 1994.
Yeah, he came across because there was a conference, I think it was the Australian Academy of Sciences, which was talking about population in 2040. He stood up and said Australia can only support a population, as a paleontologist, someone who studies dead things, of 6 to 7 million people.
And it's an example where their obsession with population is what they base their science on. That comes first,
Yes.
right? People should watch the episode we've done of this show on why Australia needs 100 million people. But Craig, Flannery has a buddy, a German named Professor Hans Schellenhuber, who's also works for the Queen. He is her personal private envoy on climate change. And it's Schellenhuber who has recently come out with the shocking announcement that the world population needs to be drastically cut back. What's he saying?
Down to 1 billion people, but the Queen knighted this guy for his services to sciences. So he's not just some arbitrary figurehead. This person is working directly under the auspices of the Crown. Otherwise he wouldn't be knighted. But he's come out, and you're right, he said we have to reduce the population not down to 2 billion as Prince Philip has said, but down to below 1 billion.
Now my question for you is, with all this heating up, why now? Why are we seeing a flurry of this now?
Because the world's financial and monetary system is disintegrating. The other side of this green fascism is this idea of privatisation and globalisation that we talked about before. The British Empire exists on what we call monetarism, the control of money through central banks in order to control populations. But as we see in Europe, you're seeing the whole country is being now taken over by this monetarist operation. You see the elected government of Italy is being run by technocrats from Goldman Sachs.
But it's their system that's collapsing. That's why they have to do this.
That's their system's going down. So you've got Greece, you've got Italy, they're all being run because their system's coming down. But this is why they have to promote the control of the population even more through these fascist means, is because they're losing control.
They're determined, aren't they, to make sure that sovereign governments don't take steps against the financial crisis that put their people first.
That's exactly right. And if people were to wake up and actually realise that these people aren't quite as powerful as they think they are, if you can actually talk about what's going on like we have, then you take off the shackles, you take off the blinds towards what's actually really going on.
Okay, so we can only give you a foretaste of what you'll discover when you read this publication. Read it in depth. It's 56 pages, but that's good. There's more to know. And if you need copies, order them from us at the CEC. So that's it for this week. Tune in again for more of the CEC Report.
It's always been my dream to represent Australia in the Olympics. Epilepsy affects nearly 250,000 Australians. Like me, most people have their seizures controlled with medication. Even today, people with epilepsy face incredible discrimination, but this prejudice is just another obstacle we can overcome. We're just as capable as anyone else, and often we have to be stronger. I promise I'll do my best for Australia. Will you do your best for me?
There's a difference between forgetting something once and forgetting it many times. There's a difference between forgetfulness and dementia. Talk to someone who understands. Call the National Dementia Helpline on 1800 100 500.
MELfeed.video.
Alleluia. Om Mani Padme. Om. Allah.
Welcome to Harmony and Diversity. Norm Curry's my name, and today we're talking again to Freeman Trebilcock, who is a Buddhist monk. Thank you, Freeman.
Thank you, Norm.
Part of what this series is about is to actually bring people's faith into practical action in the world. Where does it happen? And I'm aware of some things that you're involved in, and we'll discuss those. The first of those is the Loving Kindness Network. What's that?
So the Loving Kindness Network, or it was originally called Loving Kindness Peaceful Youth, originated actually from one of my Buddhist teachers, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. He was visiting America during the time of the Columbine school shootings, and at that time there was a lot of conversation in the media around the music that the kids were listening to, about the access to guns, things like that, but no one was talking about what was impelling these children to actually do the acts in terms of their own minds, and in terms of the anger that they had, in terms of the lack of compassion for the people who, I guess, were in their school. And so out of that, this organization was born with the values of trying to create a more peaceful world by transforming ourselves, by working with our own minds, I guess, in order to disarm our own aggression. So it's really a peace organization, but with a focus on starting with yourself first.
So how did that manifest itself? Did it manifest itself at Columbine? Was that where it started?
I mean, look, it really took a while for anyone to take hold of the idea. I first heard about the idea through Lama Zopa, and then met up with some other young people that I knew here in Australia, and we started it here. And since that time, the organisation has grown internationally, but not in any kind of controlled way. We're not out there at the moment trying to, I guess, launch in a new country every week. What we've provided is some really useful tools for young people particularly, to, I guess, explore their own psychology, develop positive qualities particularly, because, you know, there's no use to saying we need to be less violent. We need to work on the qualities that are, I guess, in opposition to those violent ones. So qualities such as patience, humility, things like that. But also empowering qualities such as courage, you know, the ability to actually deal with sort of difficult situations. So the organisation now, we have small groups called habit groups. And habits are started by a young person who sees a need in their community, and it's just kind of almost like a youth group model, but where young people bring others together once a week or once a fortnight to do some activities. But it's got a real focus on cultivating the inner world and the warm-heartedness and the inner values in a very secular way. So Loving Kindness Peaceful Youth is not a Buddhist organisation. You don't have to be Buddhist. Okay. I mean, it's got Buddhist roots, but you don't have to be a Buddhist to participate. It's just about the cultivation of sort of certain positive qualities. So there's habit groups now I think there's about 10 habit groups in Mexico. It's really taken off in Mexico. I think because I visited there last year, I think it's because of it's quite a violent society. Yes. And they're struggling at the moment with, I guess, the drug cartels at war. And it's quite, I think people are really searching for that kind of positive transformation in their communities. So it's really big there. We've got ones dotted around Europe as well. There's one in Hungary, Denmark, Norway. There's a couple here in Australia. There's not one in the US yet, surprisingly so. So we're waiting for someone to stick their hand up and start one, because it comes out of that context originally with Columbine.
How does it, as you say, it's secular, how do you get people interested in the first place? What's the seed that's sown for them? It's
actually a challenge. It's really not easy, and I don't think there's a magic bullet to mix metaphors, so to speak, for a peace organisation. Oh dear. I think look, I've thought a lot about this actually, and I still think our branding is not quite right. The moment we're saying to people, you know, be peaceful, be tolerant, but actually I think the only way that you're going to get young people involved is if the message has to be more powerful and more compelling than the message that our world is currently selling young people, which is a message about, you know, fame and self-aggrandizement and kind of almost hedonistic kind of message.
Yes.
Whereas we need to be promoting a message of, you don't need to be a consumer of things to be happy. You can actually produce your own well-being. You can become a producer. You can be empowered and strong. And I mean, I think that message needs to be the focus. At the moment, I think the communication at the moment is not quite right for Loving Kindness Peaceful Youth. So we're still working on that. But I honestly believe that people need this material, yes. And getting it to young people in whatever way, I think that's a really important task. So.
It certainly is, and I would imagine that some of the people who are attracted are they refugees from drug addiction?
There are some. I know that in the Mexico groups, there's a few people there who've had difficult lives, maybe sort of almost got mixed up in sort of serious crime, not quite, but you know, on the edge. In Australia, our groups have really more been focused on young people who are just confused and searching.
Yes.
And so I think the urgency of a peace organisation isn't as strong in Australia as it is in somewhere like Mexico, because of there's violence in your streets in Mexico. And there's not so much, I mean, there's not as much violence here. But what I think is a resonant message here is the culture which underlies that kind of overt violence, which looks, I mean, on an internal level, it's much more subtle, but it's things like bullying, you know? It's things like people manipulating one another and abusing one another. And that happens, I think, a lot, and we see that a lot in our experiences. And maybe the high levels of suicide that you see amongst young people relates to that culture of violence, and maybe even self-hatred, you know. Young people, they struggle. They really, I've seen it, 'cause I mean, a lot of my friends have struggled growing up with their own issues, you know, and a lot of, I guess, self-loathing and we call it lack of self-esteem, but it's really just being down on yourself. So young people in Australia do need that as well.
They certainly do, and we also need more time because we're going to go to a break, and we shall return shortly.
Hush, little baby, don't you cry. Daddy's gonna sing you a lullaby. When you're sleeping safe and sound, you've got the proudest dad in town. I remember when I first saw you, your heart beating as you grew. We'll read you stories to help you dream. Your mommy and I are a perfect team. I can't wait to hear you sing or watch as you put on a wedding ring. One day you'll have children too. Remember the times I sang to you.
Are you playing renovation roulette? I'm John Jarrett. Now I know that deadly asbestos lies hidden in 1/3 of Aussie homes. It can be found in any home built or renovated before 1987. Lurking in walls, under floor covering, behind tiles, in roofing. Asbestos, it was used everywhere. So if you're a renovator or a tradie, you could be risking your life and the lives of others. Remember, go slow. Asbestos, it's a no-go. Visit asbestosawareness.com.au to learn what you need to know.
Hallelujah.
You're watching Harmony and Diversity. Norm Curry is my name, and we're speaking to Freeman, who is a Tibetan Buddhist monk. Freeman, you've been involved, we've just discussed your involvement with Loving Kindness Network, which is fascinating in its own right. You're also are you still the Regional Youth Ambassador for the United Religions Initiative?
I think I may have graduated, but I think they've let me go now. So I think they've got a new batch in. They've got a new batch in by now. But yeah, I was the URI Regional Youth Ambassador. United Religions Initiative is a very grassroots interfaith organisation. So they have groups all around the world.
Yes.
And they're really focusing on getting more young people involved in interfaith now, I think. So it's a really good thing to see.
And is that big in Australia, or is it sort of?
So URI has what it calls cooperation circles around the world. So any group of people, I think you have to have people from 3 or more faiths, and including atheists that can can also be in there as well. So that's really important in Australia particularly. So 3 or more religions, you get people together and you form a group, a cooperation circle, and you just sign on to the Charter of United Religions Initiative and become part of their movement, I guess. I think they have 470 cooperation circles around the world now, of which Interaction, my organisation, is one.
You mentioned before we were looking at the loving kindness networks that there's quite a few in Australia and in Europe, not America, and a few quite a few in Mexico.
Yeah.
And now you're saying that in Australia it's really important to have the capacity to include non-religious people. What is it about Australia? Why would that be the case? If that is the case, why have we got this network taking off here? What do you think's the driver?
That's a really interesting question. I think it would take a long time to pull that one apart. I'd like to talk about 2 different things related to that.
Yeah.
One, there is a strong interfaith movement of people from all different religions who are, I guess, called to work together. It's quite a progressive movement, and that movement, I think, has excluded non-religious people.
Yes.
And that's something that needs to change, I think, if we're going to move forwards. But secondly, there is this I think there's sort of an antagonism from the secular world about religion. And it's not universal, obviously, but I mean, it's quite a dominant narrative that I guess religion is old school, is archaic, doesn't have a role to play in our world. And so you have those 2 conversations happening separately. So there's the secular people who are trying to, I guess, not even thinking about religion probably, and then the interfaith people who are trying to progress religion and move it forwards, but not talking to the non-religious people. So I think there's a concern there, because I think some of the most exciting things are coming out of those interfaith organisations, as well as the secular organisations like peace organisations, or, for example, the Oak Tree Foundation is a charity based here in Australia that work on poverty. Now they've got Christian roots, but they almost hide that completely because they're working with the secular world and trying to do mainstream change and do things like that. I think if people who are strongly embedded in their faith have a serious conversation with the secular mainstream, and that conversation can be 2-way, then you have this great possibility of spiritually informed change in a really powerfully deeply motivated change in a pluralistic way that is completely open, and also open up to non-religious people as well. So I mean, I hope I unpacked what I think needs to happen there, but
well, you certainly have. There's this existence of this spiritual no man's land in the middle, and a lot of youth are in that. So is it a Buddhist perspective, or is it a personal one with the organisations you're involved in, where you consciously involve people who might describe themselves loosely as atheists? Is that it?
Well, this is a good question. Is it a Buddhist thing to work with I mean, if you want to be technical about it, Buddhists are atheists.
Yes.
If you're very technical.
Yes.
Which is that we don't talk about a creative God. We do talk about an all-loving, all-knowing kind of, all-knowing consciousness. But we don't talk about a created God. So you could technically say we're atheists. I think Buddhism has appealed maybe to atheists more.
Yes.
Because we have rules against trying to convert people, like it's not on. And I'm sure some people still do it. And I know of partners who wanted their dearly beloved to become a Buddhist, so they've left Buddhist books lying around the house and stuff. So I'm sure it does happen. But I think Buddhism has a pretty good brand because we don't try and promote and I guess pitch the religion to non-believers. So I think there's a lot of people who walk into it quite openly because there's no threat there. So I think Buddhism and atheism go quite hand in hand. They're not contradictory.
Yes, that's a subtle point, but you're correct, and that is why these young people can feel more comfortable with that. But at that level of as you said, the spiritual interface between the secular and the religious,
Yeah.
the generation of awareness in that space. What do you think the engine is for getting the best effect from that, apart from being a Buddhist?
The engine of awareness. That's a beautiful term. I think you can't be dishonest to people's experience. I think a lot of the issue at the moment with religion's relevance is it doesn't meet people at where they're at, which is a kind of a really dark, kind of dirty, damaged place, really. For a lot of people, that's a lot of young people's experience. So if you're going to connect with people with spiritual wisdom, you've got to say, look, this is where we begin. Life is a shit, you know, like there's...
Yes.
And young people think like they're the one with the problem and that like they're too bad for like improvement.
Yes.
So you've got to start with where they're at, I think, and then you can grow and help them cultivate.
Yeah, that's a very powerful perspective, and it certainly gives a reason for why Buddhist groups are spreading throughout commerce and industry. Lots of people have these Buddhist groups at lunchtime, etc. Talking about lunchtime, it's time for a break, and we will return shortly.
This bank is helping to save lives. Every year, 500,000 Victorians have no idea where their next meal is coming from. Food Bank Victoria works with farmers, supermarkets and manufacturers to make sure their surplus stock ends up here, to be distributed to those in need. But all of this is not enough. Right now, this bank needs interest, your interest, to support Victorians in need. If you can help, visit foodbankvictoria.org.au.
Most of us experience life's ups and downs, but we can always appreciate the finer details that make life worth living. But for 1 in 5 of us, mental illness can make us lose sight of the big picture. That's when Paran Mission can lend a helping hand. We've been caring for the community for over 60 years, finding a place for people with no place. Show your support and stand up for mental illness. Visit our website and make a donation today.
I'm able to dream, I'm able to smile, I'm able to grow, and I'll go the extra mile, one day at a time. So put your hands together, we can change lives forever. Together, we're able.
Able Australia. Together, we're able.
Welcome back to Harmony and Diversity. Norm Curry is my name, and I'm speaking with Freeman, who is a Buddhist monk, a Tibetan Buddhist monk. We've covered some fascinating stuff, Freeman, and you are active again in a group called Interaction. Tell us about that.
So we started Interaction basically with the vision that amongst our diverse religious traditions, there was a common theme, and that common theme was about compassion and about altruism and service to others. So we started that organisation a few years ago. I guess we didn't know quite what we wanted to do, but we knew that we wanted to get our hands dirty, actually do the kinds of things that our religions called us to do. And inspired us to do. So we did sort of community service projects, we ran a clothing drive, we did things like that. And eventually we realized that there were lots of other young people like us who were out there who was feeling confused about their religious tradition, wanted a way, I guess, to translate this tradition into the modern world and make it useful, make it relevant. And so we began running workshops with other young people to help them, I guess, reflect a bit more deeply on the wisdom within their own faith tradition and how that called them to lead lives more filled with compassion and empathy and kindness and so forth. So that we've been running those workshops now for over a year, and I can tell you people are truly inspired by the opportunity to actually look at this more deeply. I think in our society that space doesn't really exist. If it's, you know, you can't have a space, you can't have a conversation about religion with your mates, and if you go to a religious organisation, the conversation is not usually a very open one.
No.
And so to have that space amongst peers, you know, that's been the most valuable thing we've found.
So those, looking at your website, I underlined, in fact, people to bring their shared values, and going back to the agnostic or the atheist at the extreme. Do you attract them as well?
About 30% of the people who do our workshops are still atheists or searching, you know, still not sure. And I think that reflects Australia's young people. Actually, I think there is actually quite a larger group of non-religious young people. I think it's probably more like 60 or 70% if you look at the data of people who are non-religious or still seeking or figuring it out for themselves. Which is huge, and that's bigger than the older generation, which I think the older generation is about 30 or 40% non-religious or no belief, or they don't answer on the census. So basically, I think having young people who are not religious as part of that conversation is absolutely essential.
Absolutely.
And they benefit, but also the religious people benefit because it doesn't become cliquey. It's not all about, you know, our one belief in God. You know, it actually becomes about a bit more like the real fundamental things that we share.
Yeah, it's interesting in putting in a Christian context and talking about a church. It actually, the church has regurgitated itself out into the community, and it's actually living in the community rather than in the church. That seems to be, as I say, from a strictly Christian perspective.
It's almost like community has replaced church.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the problem I think with that is that where's the space for deep reflection in community? It's quite hard to find, I think. There's a lot of activity.
Yes.
But I think religious traditions, and also the techniques and the technicians, the people who, like, I'm a monk, right, so I'm maybe trying to be biased, but the ones who dedicate their lives kind of almost exclusively to spiritual practice or work or whatever they're doing, I think they are incredible resources.
Yes.
Not to preach the religion so that everyone converts, but I guess to help other people who don't have that much time to dedicate, to become their mentors. So, yeah, sorry, it's a bit of a tangent, but I do think...
No, it's a very, very relevant
religions
tangent.
still are needed for that.
That's absolutely right, and I think that this is where values come into it. These young people are not getting their values from their family, they're searching for values.
Yeah.
Now, you raise that issue, like, say, and I'm going Christian again, but a Catholic priest, for example, actually marries God. In your case, what's that process? Do you and I raise this because of the significance of having people like yourself in these shared value groups. What's your process? Do you feel as though what's the commitment? You're marrying, does it go to that extent?
It doesn't really. I mean, we as a Buddhist monk, you do take certain vows related to that. But the commitment's really to your own self-actualization, your own enlightenment, for the benefit of others. Right. So you don't marry a church or an institution, but you do, I guess, make that heartfelt commitment in order to be of service to others, which is the main underlying motivation behind, I guess, monasticism. Yes. Is that altruism. It's got to be there. But I think from a values level, everyone sees that as important. So you don't need to give up a worldly life in order to live with that motivation. You can go to your work every day with that same motivation of, and may, by doing this work, I become of most benefit to others, you know? So
yeah, but there's power in you wearing a uniform.
There is.
Yeah. And I think that's basically it. If you look at law and order, we're all responsible for it, but having a policeman in uniform makes a bit of a difference to your interpretation of it.
It does.
So just getting back to the interaction, this is really quite exciting. So what are the activities that spin off from this? You were saying that you have...
Yep, we've done different projects in the past. The main project we're working on at the moment is called the Fast Supper. Right. Which is a bit of a pun on the Last Supper, which is it's a food van, but it's really about breaking down social isolation. So we arrive at the Housing Commission flat in South Melbourne with a hot meal, and everyone comes down, has the meal, shares it together, And it's an opportunity to connect with people and build bridges of understanding and meet one another. So to my mind, the main reason why we need projects like the Fast Supper and organisations like Interaction is because we need an opportunity to put our faith into practice and make it real and embody those values of compassion, which we're called to by our spiritual traditions. That's inspirational, Freeman. Thank you very much for your time, and we've run out of it. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. Baha'u'llah, Shanti Om, Allahu.
Now it's time for a quick reminder of programs coming up tonight on MELfeed.video, so please stay with us. Hi, I'm Darren McElwain from Air FM Drive. You can tune into my show from 3 to 6 p.m. on 88.0 in Penrith and also on tunein.com. And apparently, we don't throw rocks. Air FM Drive.
Come on, fellas. Let's get down there.
Hang on. Where's Dave?
Oh, hey, fellas. What do you think? Pretty cool, eh?
Real men look out for each other. Don't let your mates drink and drown.
I want to get the word out to blokes about a little gland called the prostate. It's only the size of a walnut, but it can cause a whole lot of grief. Prostate cancer deaths pretty much equal breast cancer deaths. The problem is, if you wait too long, it may be too late. It took one of my mates. Don't make me angry. Talk to your doctor about your prostate, and if necessary, get it checked. You'd be nuts to leave it to chance.
Joy, well-being, community, inclusion.
Special Olympics is a global movement for people with an intellectual disability, creating a world of inclusion and community through sport, where every person is accepted and welcomed, regardless of ability. One athlete, one volunteer, one family member at a time, helping to make the world a better place. Join the inclusion revolution by supporting Special Olympics.
And choose to include.
If you choose to drink then drive,
You could ruin lives,
someone else's
your families,
or your own,
choose not to instead.
the right choice could save someone's life.
Proud supporters of safety in our community.
GMCU and Southern Cross Austereo.
MELfeed.video.
This program is proudly sponsored by Overload Poetry Inc., producers of the Melbourne Overload Poetry Festival, and by Westward Poetry, the Western Suburbs' premier poetry reading.
And this poem about skateboarding, my son has been a dedicated skateboarder till he broke his knees severely at age 16, but he still does skate a bit. This is it's called vers libre, free verse. Out on the skateboard he is writing free verse, floating up to rails and benches, sailing in the lower air. And it's all just a matter of muscles and tendons, of going on your nerve, as Frank O'Hara, New York mystic, memorably said. The vocab's in the knees and ankles, ollies, kickflips, calves and grinds, the tricks that risk the full cement, the moves that sometimes don't work out, that bailing to a minor scuttle, the rolling on a shoulder. Friends, of course, are part of it, but they are not the point. The deck, the curb, the wheels, and he are writing as the wind might blow across the options of the concrete, an endless, evanescent poem.
Okay, romance. Titian. She was skinny as a boy. Thickest thing about her was that accent, like a storm off the Antrim coast. Red hair, wide mouth, risky laugh, a fiddle at her chin. My eyes followed her fingers, watched her bow hook beneath one of my ribs and pull my heart out. For weeks we crossed each other in the pub, on the beach. It wasn't a big town. She was a cocky, keep-up kind of girl in her quiet way. A month from the Belfast troubles, hard to impress and not about to change. Sometimes we shared a pint. Sometimes we talked music but didn't agree on much. Often I'd see her on a beat-up boy's bicycle flying through the midday heat, every inch of pale skin hidden from the sun, and that amazing hair flagging beneath her old straw hat. Wanting to get on her good side, I told her once my mother's hair was red. She considered me a second from the furnace of her eyes. Titian, she said. Then she straddled her bike, ready again to wheel long-legged across the moral high ground. My hair's not red, it's Titian.
I came from a small farm on the Richmond River, unlike Jeff, who was on the Clarence, and my ancestors were illiterate, cocky farmers, and I love that place and I hate it. We were a mixture of Irish and Danish blood, and I still feel the tug of Ireland, Shamrock. In sheltered wood and coppice across the Great Divide, the sorrel and the shamrock still wear the green with pride, a requiem for croppies left fighting sun with scythe. Sedition of the patriots exported oceans wide in search of liberty, to feed the bobbing stars with blood and bone and tweak the heart and lure the scattered exiles home as clover to the bee.
I've had a lovely time here in Australia, and many people have been very kind to me. Someone who's been particularly kind to me is Robin Rowland, who read earlier today, and we've talked about children and what are children for, and children are to remind us how badly behaved we were when we were children ourselves. I'm sure that's true. This is a poem for my own son, which is, well, he's not a bad boy at all. It's more just about, well, I suppose, marking time in some sense, and it's called Skin Deep. They're back again in the bathroom, the holy oils of chrism clear as sill. My son begins his final approach to the lunarscape adult world. He is proud of his skin-burst badge, the first kid in his class, a rash of the same old jokes, Spot the dog, the blackheads of Dakota, the scarlet pimple Nell. It's time to take the long walk, so that he can link my arm and gently explain to me this voice-breaking, gland-sweating, heart-stopping business of SEX. Good.
while I'm in the mood, I had one more Irish poem. I can't find it. What I'll do is read you my cosmology poem 1, which is very short. I think the Big Bang is a conspiracy from the religious lobby to get a creation into the universe. Where did it come from? Who created the creator? All that sort of stuff. Cosmology is 1. If you can't get the hang of Big Bang, if you're in a muddle with Hubble or foiled with Hoyle, or left in the cold with their black holes and quarks in the dark, I thought you'd never ask. My theory is more laissez-faire. It's always been there.
Every time you shop, the choices you make affect our community. It is important to select Australian products made by Aussie-owned companies. Our food security means quality and peace of mind. Your purchasing power keeps your dollars multiplying in our economy, keeping jobs, profits and decisions being made right here, which is better for your children.
So the next time you buy, look for the AusBuy logo. It makes all the difference.
Would your life be different if you chose to swim between the flags instead of that unpatrolled beach? If you'd checked the depth before you dived into shallow water, if you didn't swim under the influence of alcohol and chose not to swim at night, if you only listened to the lifesavers warnings.
Make the right choice this summer. Enjoy our beautiful beaches. Always swim between the red and yellow flags.
If we can't see you, we can't save you.
I was in my 40s when I was first diagnosed with bowel cancer. George, my son, was 6 years old at that time. These days, like people of his age, he's very busy, but he still needs to find the time to get to know his bowel cancer risk. Is that right, George?
Yes, Dad. Bowel cancer affects 1 in 12 Australians, young and old, and is our second biggest cancer killer. But if caught early, bowel cancer is treatable and beatable. My dad is living proof of that. So get to know your bowel cancer risk. Talk to your pharmacist or GP about screening. Protect yourself and the ones you love. Go to lovemyfamily.org.au.
If you were living on the streets, wouldn't you want more than just your best friend to keep you safe and warm? Donate to Backpack Bed for Homeless and give warm, waterproof protection and dignity tonight. Call 1300 OzHelp.
This is a brightness and starts with a epigraph from Al-Qaeda. It says, "We will get rid of those who are non-believers. There is no brightness for them in this world or the next." Non-believers, hey, that's me. Middle-aged, mild-mannered me, under wide agnostic skies down here in the great Southland. I who always dodged a fight and never really made a scene in 30 years of marriage. Unmolested in the playground, I who knew how not to catch the recessed bully's eye. And here on screen with their bazookas, Kalashnikovs and fake grenades, they're trying out their petrol flicks, dashing up 3 flights of stairs and kicking in the doors. Beards and caftans, shining eyes, turbans flowing in the wind. They have a Boy Scout touch about them. What is the starlight that they see? A text they bang their foreheads on to map the way of God? You'd think he'd kill us all himself if he had half a mind to, or fry us later at his leisure. Other, less reclusive men, whom I can only half admire, have chased them sideways from their lairs and rounded up a few to take back home as souvenirs. But somewhere still they have their brightness, these enemies I do not seek, and I am in the great Southland, faithful in my disbelief.
The Christmas concert. At Percy Grange, motto Dignity with Care, it is Christmas. Aishin, the manager, festive in her red stocking cap, has set the residents on their chairs or folded them across their Zimmer frames so they can hear the Bermuda-shorted preacher tell of Jesus' love for the lowliest among us. But the amens sound like gasps. The common room's as close as a barn in the Holy Land. Aishin doesn't know it yet, but the air conditioner's on hottest. Today's entertainment begins with Aishin's family. No equity rates and the boys double as waiters. Number 3 son is 9 and scrapes a violin. Number 2 son strangles his clarinet. Number 1 son demonstrates the kicks and grunts he's learned at Taekwondo. The audience goes wildish. Aishin's pride spreads to the snowball at the end of her cap. Number 4 son, 7 years old, pink-cheeked and wiggle-worm thin, has no art himself, so heckles the beautiful, blue-eyed magician, apparently no relation, who comes on next. Magician asks Madam in the front row for her ring, but she won't let him have it. He asks Sir, but Sir's knuckles have swollen in the unaccustomed heat. Magician settles for making some silk scarves disappear up the sleeve of his tuxedo. Magician takes a bow and exits. Then Aishin's husband, Buddy, who's been chain smoking in the carport, comes on to perform his Tai Chi routine. The preacher, limp and sweating in his armchair, refuses to applaud either the magic or the Tai Chi, suspecting the devil's hand in both. At last, the band from U3A sets up. The leader announces an ethnic medley. Aishin at the back of the room encourages people to clap along, and they do clap, to whatever music or country or year they have in their heads. But the Greek folk song scatters as though attacked by Trojans. The band wants to finish with carols. The leader suggests the audience stand to sing. The next 10 minutes is filled with the groaning of joints and the scream of bottoms tearing themselves off heated vinyl. For a second, the smile fades from Aishin's face, and she finally checks the air conditioner. Soon, the oboe player who's been looking faint revives for Silent Night, which everyone sings, including sons 1 through 4, who stop setting tables, and Buddy, who pauses in the middle of turning sausages, and the preacher, who looks happy again. When the last strains of Heavenly Peace have risen to meet the smell of barbecued chops, Aishin shouts, "Ho, ho, we will have Father Christmas now." And from the kitchen comes a consumptive Santa whose beautiful blue eyes above his phony whiskers and a silk scarf trailing from the leg of his red pants. Thank you.
All right, I found my Irish poem. This is the orange and the green. I had a great-grandmother from Portadown in Armagh, and she was distinctly orange. And I had another great-grandmother from Limerick, and she was distinctly green. And between the two of them, they turned me a muddy orange. Bobby Sands MP is dead, a Gandhi of his time. His defiant mother on TV, a chopper winnows overhead. The petrol bombs in Belfast, a skirmish in Armagh. The dreary bogside slums still tug the shirt sleeves of my heart. With a matriarch from Limerick and one from Portadown, the green infused the orange as well-worked plasticine. We threw verse at the Catholics as kids beyond the pale and fought the War of Ulster 12,000 miles away. Sweet Jesus, come between them and teach them how to knit the rift of Cardinal and Queen when Ireland must be green.
I'll finish off with a poem about my father. When I was a child, at one stage we shared a bed together. I think this is kind of Irish Catholic family planning in some sense, at least as was. But anyway, we shared the bed together, and I have a good memory of him at one stage making one of those admissions of, defeat that adults make all the time, something like, I can't go on. And of course, we all do it, but kids find that somehow or other quite something. Also, we weren't much comfort to each other in the bed, as neither of us is particularly flesh covered. We're somewhat flesh challenged, I suppose. We were once, our entire family was once referred to by a Donegal writer as the bony-arsed bogmen from Cavan. So, the poem then, the poem is called The Bony. When I shared a bed in 1952 or 3 with my bony father, I was led to believe that we were alone. Now I can own that when his bony frame closed in upon my back, and he whispered my name into my bony neck, behind him lay his bony father, and behind his bony grandfather, his bony great-grandfather, all that long-lined boniness lying in state, their collective bony weight pulling him down, but slow, a little heavier each year until he finally let go. And I fear he's here now with the same bony crew, light as a feathery ton. Well, they have a job to do, but not a word to my son. Thank you very much.
Every time we buy certified organic, we're making a choice to help our environment and build a healthier community. But it can be hard to know that what we're buying is truly organic. The Australian Certified Organic logo is only given to products after a very rigorous process. So when you see this logo, it means you can trust that there are no genetically modified foods, no animal cruelty, and no harsh synthetic pesticides used. A healthier community is always better for our future. So the next time you shop, look for this logo.
Take it from me, one punch can be lethal. Thrown in anger like this, without warning, without any gloves, it can be deadly. One punch can end his life and ruin yours. It takes grunt to throw it, it takes guts to walk away.
I'll finish with a poem called A Short History of Immigration, and it is fairly short, just 2 pages, and it's you need to remember that the Eora, or the Eora, the people, Aboriginal people who lived around Sydney, still live around Sydney, but not in quite the same numbers. A Short History of Immigration. Oh my God, say the Eora, what's all that red, white, blue? Oh my God, says Captain Phillip, we've brought the Irish too. Oh my God, say London lags, please send us no more thieves. Begorrah, Lord, the Irish say be sparing us Chinese. Bloody hell, send back Kanakas, our noble workers jeer. They cut the cane in half the time, a man can't buy a beer. Dear God of England, Barton prays, do keep our country white and leave the heathen in his place, far north and out of sight. O King of Jazz, the 20s roar, it's populate or perish. A country white as Reckitt's Blues, the only one to cherish. God help us quick, says 42, we're damn well on our knees. The peril's here, bring on the Yanks to place the Japanese. And look, dear God, here come the Dagos bouncing off the boat. We're nearly out of Dutch and Danes and Englishmen of note. And now, dear God, here come the Bolts escaping Mother Russia. Next week we'll have the Reds as well, Ivan and Natasha. Oh my God, the bolts exclaim, and day goes with degrees. What's this, the tide is throwing up the bloody Vietnamese? We'll all be strangled in our sleep and take to heroin. You hardly know which vault these days to store your money in. Oh my God, we shriek as one. Here come the men in scarves. They bang their head against the floor. They don't do things by halves. Let them join the queue, we say, wherever it might be, and let them have their backside stamped before they put to sea. He who flees a terrorist, probably one himself. The way of true compassion is to send them somewhere else, some atoll where in time the tide will rise by 20 metres. A logical solution, yes? Could anything be neater? The advent of such dodgy types will make us all the poorer. By Christ, you know, you might be right, declares an old Aora. Thank you.
One more. I know it's been a long afternoon. I'm tired, so no doubt you are. This is a poem to an Aboriginal called Tunau Gunaldan, whom I met when I worked at the museum many years ago, who sang songs, and these are translations of his songs. He died from eating salt from a kidney complaint in '79. Tunau Gunaldan. Plastic paint on wide black face, singing boomerangs, clap in, fish hunting song, a white cloud comes. Yamare meringa, yamare mere, yamare meringa, yamare mere. You undo ma, you undo, you undo ma, you undo. Yammering, a big white cloud comes tearing up the sea. Waves hit rocks, make spray. Fishing will be good today. The great rainbow serpent and the giant devil dingo play didgeridoo. Sound of the wind, the leg shake dance, bing-a wajara, bing-a warella. I am the wind, you can't see me, I am the wind. I have no woman, women can't see me, I am the wind. Next is a happy dance for young and old together. Be like the boomerang tree with strong, hard wood. Good baru, garong, good baru, garinga, marewade woda. Be strong like the strong wood, a good song for children. I too am strong like the tree, except my kidneys rooted. The women sing the seagull song, Lajaradum Baina. Husband, walk about too long, I am your wife, come back to me, come home. Lajaradum Baina, young and day, Lajaradum Baina, young and day, Lajaradum Baina, Bergen day, Lajaradum Baina, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, mashed potatoes, yeah, Lajaradum Baina. Scholars may in truth believe before they write these theses. These are the songs he sang to me before he started dreaming. Thank you.
We now have a special moment from Dean Frankel. Dean Frankel is, well, he describes himself as a harmonic overtone singer. We first heard him at an exhibition we had with some Mongolian art and desert painting here earlier in the year. Yeah, and also in Mongolia, you were describing the other day that this is very ancient poetry, so it's working very well with the poetry festival. Dean's a recording artist, he's an author, and he's a Guinness Book of Record holder. He has several albums and teaches at festivals and conferences.
I'm a harmonic overtone singer, as Jenny said. I've also had a lot to do with poetry, but I'm not going to talk too much about that. I'm going to ask you to stretch your minds and stretch your senses, and I'm going to give you some overtones to start with. short piece because I put a little bit of this next piece into what I did then. One of the aspects of overtone singing is throwing the voice. So I'm going to throw the voice a bit, and then I'm going to move into another piece called Rainmaker, because it's kind of apt. And if it rains, you'll know it had to do with my singing. Well, what can I say? That was short.
This program was proudly supported by our sponsors.
Here are the current weather readings for Melbourne, Geelong and Shepparton on the MELfeed.video weather wall. It also includes tomorrow's forecast and expected minimum temperatures in these areas overnight. This is the MELfeed.video weather wall. We are currently looking for a sponsor. If you're interested, please email Michael at MELfeed.video for more details.
Hi, this is just a reminder that we will be returning to Wednesday next week. This is just for Thursday for tonight, but we will be returning to MELfeed video transmissions next week on Wednesday. So we'll see you then. And next up, I think, is 15 Fabulous Minutes, if I'm remembering rightly. But let's see if we... yes, it is, actually. So we're just about to head into 15 Fabulous Minutes, and we'll see you again soon.
Imagine not seeing the world you live in. Macular disease is Australia's leading cause of blindness. Donate now to Macular Disease Foundation Australia. Call 1800 111 709 or visit mdfoundation.com.au.
Had enough of the bad news about carbon dioxide and climate change? Wood is one solution. Trees take CO2 from the air and store it in their wood. They're also renewable, unlike concrete and steel. But the wood you choose should be recycled or from certified plantations or forests. This helps protect areas of high conservation value. So next time you're building or buying something, make it wood and do your world some good.
MELfeed.video.
Hi, I'm Steve.
And I'm Jacqueline. And we're the Two Non-Blondes.
And here we are at Style Aid 99 in transit.
Wondering why
I chose to wear feathers this evening? Well, because of course the theme tonight at Style Aid is transit, and I am on a voyage as we speak. I'm in flight, a journey of self-discovery.
Tonight's entertainment, of course, there's shows, there's Marsha Hines, there's also Opal Ross, star celebrity from Rent Musical. What are you doing tonight?
I've just been told tonight that I am opening the show.
Well, that's a pretty big thing. I think you're also releasing your new single, is that right?
Yeah, that'll be released in a couple of months' time, and I'm actually doing a preview of it tonight. So what I'm singing is basically my single, which is called Our Place.
Well, here I am at Style Aid, one of Melbourne's premier social events. Yes, the night of nights, that's right, where food and fashion and the fabulous is what it's all about, as well as supporting HIV, AIDS and the cause. And we have two flight hostesses behind me, or air stewardesses, as no doubt you're now called.
Yes, that's right. Correctness.
So how many languages did you have to understand and to know to get this job?
None specific. I've got 2 languages, Japanese and English.
Very handy. And yourself?
I just speak Australian.
Thank you, Joy, mate. And have you found this evening's entertainment so far?
Pretty amazing, actually. It's so extravagant and, yeah, it's really cool. I've never experienced anything like it.
Are there any particular celebrities you're looking forward to seeing tonight?
Lachlan Murdoch's coming along very soon, yeah. I've already seen Bob Down and got his autograph, so I'm really happy about that.
Okay, I'll be second then.
Well, here we have got about 15 minutes to landing, and we've got Angus Airways, or actually Angus Kelly. Politically speaking, what are you up to tonight?
We're doing a parade for AIDS. I think we're raising money for the AIDS Society of Australia.
So be easy doing your usual thing, walking up, down and taking a jacket off.
Doing a few turns.
It's not like normal because it's special, because it's for AIDS and because all different types of clothes, and some of us are jiggling our hips and some of us are...
Are you going to be doing the Naomi Campbell sort of duh?
Oh yeah, I look a lot like her. No, I don't, no.
Bit of a nibber.
Yeah, it's getting in my face though.
So, and you're exclusive dropping your dad?
I'm not anymore. I've just been told I can't.
Major Plans, he's going to drag. He's going to drag. I am dropping his decks for him all the way.
That's an exclusive.
You'd drop your decks for Angus, wouldn't you?
I'd loosen my bra for him.
You'd lose your bra? What would you do?
Oh, I'd take this whole dress off and just go down the catwalk naked.
You know,
all the way.
You're a popular stud here.
You can't blame him, can you?
No.
What would you do for us, Ken? Yeah, what would you do for us?
What would you do?
Sing.
I'd sing to them. I've got a very good singing voice.
I'm due for a new BMW. Can you arrange that I get one?
BMW? Yeah, I'll hook it up.
Cool.
For this evening, and she's getting pointed here. And you may have thought that foot binding had died, but no, it's alive and well and here at Style Aid this evening. Hi. Can you tell us a bit about your collection this evening, Jenny?
Well, the theme of Style Aid this year is Transit 99. So we've decided to have a plane crash in the Bermuda Triangle, and that's near Haiti, and weird things happen in the Bermuda Triangle. So I decided this year that I'd have mermaids and Lalani girls, very exotic island things in creatures. They look like tropical fish. They're around about. There's some there, some over there. Yeah. Plus I've got 4 fabulous big black guys. Here's one.
That's one of them.
Solly.
Very fabulous.
Actually binding his ankles and his arms, and they're all wearing grass skirts and big voodoo sort of Ku Klux Klan masks with coloured straw hair. And we've also got Arthur, the little person, who's got a bone in his hair. There he is up there, if you can zoom up.
Yes, we'll speak to Arthur later.
Yeah. And he's going to surprise it. He's the god, and he's going to surprise us all and leap out of a cannibal's cauldron and scare all the girls.
Looking forward to that one.
Well, Jacqueline, I think I've tied up the whole story now. I've got it done.
It's a wrap. And I have found the god himself. I'm joined by the god Arthur, who just wants to say hello. He doesn't speak. He speaks a universal language of love.
I've got one of the people here, Susan from She Cosmetics, and she's glittering up tonight, young Peter here. What's your...
Actually modelling for the Sabre Parade this evening.
So, what sort of role have you played in tonight's event?
I was actually doing the Sabre Parade, the Amani Parade, makeup for Toddy over here, who's appearing in the Amani Parade. We're also doing Marsha Hines later on, and her dancers, and Opal Ross.
So that's a fair bit of work.
Yeah, we've created a new look for each of the different ones, so you'll be able to see that here tonight, and hopefully they'll see a little bit of our famous glitter.
What kind of colours are you going for tonight?
Very natural, like the clothing is very casual, so we've focused on a very natural look.
And also
shiny.
And shiny. We've got also one of the models here, and what's your role in tonight's involvement?
Oh, you know, just about everything. A little bit of everything. A little bit of doing makeup, a little bit of doing the show, a little bit of, yeah.
Picking hair out of your mouth. You're looking very flight stewardess almost here. You need a little hat there.
Oh, I've got a ring on the back just in case I get lost.
Oh, okay. There's no doorbell there?
What's hot and what's not in hair. Take it away, Diane.
Well, it's not so much a question of what's hot and what's not. It's basically what the designers are sort of asking in the type of look they want to achieve.
Okay, Steve, just
and this evening it's basically been a lot of slick back styles, a lot of sort of wet, sort of very neat, sort of very out of the way set of looks, with with the occasional one that's slightly bordering on sort of avant-garde or just slightly tousled, such as yours, but mainly sort of fairly slicked and fairly sort of soft and natural, basically.
Fantastic.
Toddy Goldsmith. And what are you doing tonight?
Well, what does it look like? I'm getting she makeup put all over my face.
And your involvement, you're actually in one of the shows, I hear.
I'm in a Marnie Exchange.
And what will you be wearing?
I'll be wearing a bit of a skirt and a bit of a boob tube, I think.
So then we won't be seeing any boob at all then, or just the tube in general?
I think you'll be getting the tube look.
No flashing tonight then?
Oh, I'll have to think about that.
Think about that.
You never know what can happen in a big city.
On good authority that here we have the Queen, a lady who doesn't go through very many doorways, from what I can gather, for very good reason, no doubt.
Bit of pain. Yeah.
And so how do you feel tonight?
Yeah, good. Excited.
Yeah?
I think it'll be a really entertaining night. Definitely. Yeah.
And what will you be wearing? Something as wide as your head?
Yeah, something just long, big. Yeah, very nice.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Here we are with the lovely Amanda, designer of Divine Deluxe. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Now, what is your creation tonight?
We're going to Siberia.
Siberia.
Mighty cold in Siberia. So we're rugging up.
That's a fur.
Now, I've got some of your models behind here. Actually, we've just got one here. Look at this hair. Now, the detail of work has just gone into it. What will you be wearing tonight?
This big, large overcoat, and I've got this fur on.
What are you wearing under the overcoat?
Me?
Nothing?
Nothing.
Nothing. Well, there you go. You're going to give a bit of a flash?
No.
No. Wow, we're not revealing.
Of Vicious Venus, and I'm just wondering how you've managed to accommodate the theme of transit tonight.
Okay. Well, our designs are basically using corsetry. So the transition that we've done is from cyber modern futuristic punk corsetry, transcending into the more classical kind of
17th century, sort of a time transit rather than up destination.
Yeah, so that's our work basically.
Do you think that maybe your clothes can be accommodated for everyday streetwear?
Elements of them. Most of the stuff that you'll be seeing tonight is more sort of sensational, more if you want to grab attention, you're going out to an evening spot. But we definitely do pieces that can be worn for day, little corsets, coats, very glamorous clothing though.
And do you think that's the way that fashion's going into the millennium?
What do you think?
I don't necessarily think it's going that way. Our element of it is, I guess. I think it's becoming more popular, but I also think it's going the other way in the minimal sort of baggy sort of streetwear thing, raver kind of.
I think anything's possible basically. We've also got Jane Badler showing in one of our games, who was from, you may be familiar with her, she was in V, a series back in the 80s.
Does that ring a bell? Well,
maybe it doesn't, but we have Jane here from the famous TV series V.
Yes, that's right. It's a long way from V, being here backstage at Style Aids.
What brings you here tonight?
Well, I know the director of Style Aids this year, Rob Shooter. He's directed me in a couple of plays, and he asked me if I would be a celeb in one of the fashion shows. And I've never done it before, and it's fun.
Exciting.
Yeah, it's scary. It's a bit scary.
So where do you go from here? You've done the TV thing, the acting thing. Now you're doing the modelling thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, well, who knows, right? Who knows?
Take 5.
Yeah. And what do you believe style is today?
Well, as you said earlier, which I loved, is that beauty's in the eyes of the beholder. I think style's a bit like that. I think someone who's comfortable with themselves and their own style, who's not afraid to be true to themselves, I think that's really sexy and that's really good. I think when you start imitating, it oftentimes doesn't come off as style. Anyway, that's my view.
This year is transit, and Jamie from Shag is going to tell us about his interpretation of that theme.
Really, what we've done is we've taken a very eclectic look. So there's a lot of international looks, there's Turkish looks, there seems to be slight Japanese overtones, and there's also a very sort of French couture look and quite an English sort of 60s look. So really, the whole theme is sort of like, the whole show is based at an airport. And it's like a combination of people from different parts of the world coming together.
And I can't quite pick the look you've got here on your right.
That's a good question. This is kind of a look that sort of evolved. We wanted to use sort of suede and then fur, and then we sort of introduced like a space element as well. So this is actually an original 50s space helmet. It's actually a kid's piece. But yeah, so we've just sort of tied it together and given it, it's quite kitsch as well, and that's part of the look.
So that's past, present and future?
Well, I guess you could say that, yeah.
We're absolutely having a ball here, actually more than one. Jacqueline, I heard a rumour.
What?
I heard a rumour that actually Tom Cruise might be showing up tonight.
No,
no. Oh my God, I think that's him. Is it? Is it? Is that Tom Cruise?
He's the younger brother.
Oh, let down. And now there's a rumour that he is coming tonight. You're a very good lookalike.
Do you think so?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm going to be his stunt double.
Well, some
guy running through the fire for him.
Some people say I do look like Tom Cruise too.
They're lying. So, were you the double in his latest movie with Nicole Kidman in those raunchy, steamy scenes?
Yes. That was me.
That was me.
Oh, the double. What a great job.
You're at the same height, I must say.
I know.
Does that bother you? You know, being around a taller woman?
No, not at all. No, it's exhilarating. Very exhilarating. Don't you think?
I think we better find the real Tom.
Yeah, go and, I saw him. He was wandering down there.
He's wandering. Tom.
Flight in general, such as that of birds, bats, fishes, animals and insects. I have divided the treatise.
Yes, yes, I know it's transit, yes, Stylo Transit, but I've been here stuck in Athens. No, can I use my Mykonos freaking 5 points to get out of here? Oh my God. Well, this is Steve, and you can catch me maybe next year at the Stylade Year 2000. See you there. No, I need frequent flyers, first class, please, yes. Thank you.
I want to get away. I want to fly.
I didn't think this could happen in Toowoomba. And then I saw it on TV that night. It really opened my eyes.
Whenever the community comes to us and says we need your help, we do whatever we can to assist.
It is a great feeling to be able to help your neighbours, to be able to help your community.
Each Lions member and each Lions club in different parts of the country, we're totally different. But we have core values that are the same. They remain the same for any Lions member and any Lions club anywhere in not just Australia but around the world.
Anything that you can think of that you want to do and support and help, Lions are doing it right now somewhere in this world.
I think Lions need to tell their story. They need to let people know the amazing things that they do.
The three major streams that we have in Lions are the community service that we do for the public, health and medical research, and the disaster relief.
We're out there to help people. If you love helping people, get out and help them. Join a Lions Club.
We started this project about 20 years ago. All this gear would normally go to the tip. We recycle it and give it to someone less fortunate and where it is needed in the world.
Being a Lion here in Australia means that I can make a difference to my community. But most importantly, it's inspiring other people to get out and be part of their community and make it a safer and a much happier and better place to live.
Childhood cancer, I've always been interested in cancer and small children from the time I first got cancer 30 years ago. Research is an indefinite item. You can't see it, but it helps so much.
I'm here managing the money and the relationships, but other people are out there raising funds and bringing in community support. Without all of us working together, we can't affect change.
2 more extra hands at any function, any working bee, anything we do, 2 more hands can help us raise more funds, can help us serve our community better.
I went to my Lions Club and I said, I got this idea and I think it's a little bit crazy, but I think we could raise some serious money doing it. And it was to run 100 kilometres. And the club said, okay, if you want to do this, whatever you need us to do, we'll be there 100%. And I'm pretty proud to say that together we raised just over $16,000. So we blew the target out of the water, and I think that was due to a lot of the support that I got.
through my leadership training and all that, I've learned about thinking global and acting local, and Lions Club is definitely that kind of thing. They act within their communities, but the money that they raise can often end up in any corner of the world.
As an individual, I could only do so much, and whilst it was my burning desire to try and help these people, having an organisation such as the Lions family to call upon to support me and those people that were working with me just made it possible for us to achieve so much more.
You know, after the devastation, to come back into the community, you know, you were shattered by what you saw. You know, no police station, no post office, no petrol station, you know, no kindergarten. There was nothing here.
And all that water with an unstoppable.
I don't know that I've ever seen as much as arrived. There were fridges, washing machines, dryers. There was toasters, jugs, just everything.
To be invited to be a part of Lions just opened up a whole new world to me. A world that provided a structured organisation that could see that the hours that I volunteered could achieve so much more.
I think Lions is a wonderful organisation. The people in it have charity in their hearts.
I can go anywhere in this country, see somebody with a Lions badge, walk up to them and say, "Good day, you got a friend."
Never once in my life had I had a group of people where I could go to, say anything, and know that no matter what, they would be there, they would stand by me.
It's the family. That's what we call it's the Lions family. Without Lions, I think I'd be lost now because they've been my life.
We work hard, but the most important thing is we have fun.
The fellowship of all the members of the club, the broader community, it's just a tremendous organisation to belong to. You know, I'll be here till I die.
It is extremely rewarding and gratifying to be a part of an organisation that can spread its support so far and wide.
More members means more hands, means more support to the community.
I would encourage everyone just to give it a go and see if it is for them, because the return that you get for giving to others is amazing.
Get out there, do something wonderful, be part of this fantastic organisation.
Here is some brilliant news for adults who have difficulties with spelling, reading a newspaper or phone bill, or writing letters and emails. It can be easier to improve your reading and writing skills than to keep putting it off. Take the plunge. Call the Reading Writing Hotline, 1300 655 06.
1300 655 06.
It could change your life.
MELfeed.video.
Welcome to the CEC Report for the 25th of May 2018. I'm Elisa Barwick, and joining me today is CEC Research Director Robert Barwick. Welcome.
Thanks, Elisa.
And on today's show, battle lines drawn in Canberra over breaking up the banks, and the Libya model threat to North Korea means murder. So a lot of news today. Firstly, battle lines drawn in Canberra over breaking up the banks. So you've just returned from a week in Canberra talking to politicians about Glass-Steagall, Robert, and I think that the takeaway from it is the comment of the aide of one MP who said, what you're doing is working, and that's referring to what we've been asking all of our viewers to do and supporters across the country, which is to contact their Member of Parliament, visit them if possible, or email them, send a letter with our legislation calling for Glass-Steagall legislation to break up Australia's banks, which means to split away the functionality of normal everyday banking from speculative activity in order to keep safe the vital functions that keep people's livelihood going, keep the economy going. So members of Parliament are getting the message that we want them, that the population wants them to sponsor this bill. So give us a report on how that was obvious.
Well, let me just emphasise what you said for the benefit of the viewers, because we appeal to you to act, and if you do act, and if you haven't acted, take this as encouragement. You should. It works. So I was there with Dr. Wilson Sy, the former principal researcher of APRA, and we had quite a few meetings with members of Parliament, but it was as if there was him, me and the Australian public in the room with us and this Member of Parliament. That's why they met. Invariably they were responding to how much contact they were receiving from their constituents, right? Now there are plenty of ideological members of Parliament who all you do is butt heads with them, and you would find yourself in violent disagreement almost. But most members of Parliament are not like that. They're just ordinary people. They've got a million things on their plates, right? You've got to get their attention. They've got party structures that suppress any independent thinking a lot of the time. But where the impulse for change comes from is the public, right? And what happens in Australia, Elise, is we have a political system, because it's, ultimately it's at the very top, it's undemocratic under a crown. There's nothing democratic about that. It's the UK system. There's a modicum of democracy, but you get a lot of, there's no real encouragement for actual democracy, right? Grassroots democracy that's direct to members of Parliament. They'll tell you go through a party or something. If you do it, it works. That's what we were told. Here's the other thing about the meetings, though, the other takeaway. While we're there lobbying them on Glass-Steagall and explaining Glass-Steagall and the importance of breaking up the banks, citing what's been coming out of the Royal Commission, etc., we were informed that the banks were also in Parliament lobbying them on one thing: don't break us up. Now, what this tells you, this is the battle lines we referred to, right? There's us on one side, us being the CEC, who are the pointing end of this, but all you viewers and our supporters and more and more of the general public who become aware of this issue on the one side, and on the other side is the banks. That's the battle lines, and the politicians are caught in the middle. And up until now, they've had total say over it, right? We've come along and, their power is starting to crumble, and we've got something to permanently change it. And Glass-Steagall is not the solution to absolutely everything, but what it is, it's as fundamental as the law to put fences around backyard swimming pools, right? It's to put locks on chicken coops so foxes don't get in. We all accept those things are common sense. This should be the common sense cornerstone of banking. And while we don't have it, we're letting foxes run hen houses. We're letting pedophiles run kindergartens. If not to conflate the two, but as a metaphor. So it's that fundamental. It is a no-brainer, right? But the banks don't want it. Why? Because their structure is predatory, and we'll show some clips from 60 Minutes soon, and that's what you're going to confront with them. We have to demand the other side and make sure politicians deliver it.
Yeah. So there's a lot of MPs who are, actually quite passionate about Glass-Steagall, but they are under huge pressure not to do this. There's a huge fight, and they need all the encouragement they can get. And the status of the legislation, to update people, for Glass-Steagall is that Bob Katter, the federal MP for Kennedy, will table the legislation. He does need a seconder. Now, Rebecca Sharkey, she's the MP for
Mayo in South Australia, the former now. She was thrown out on the citizenship issue. Yeah,
very unfortunately, because she wrote to constituents that were asking her about this bill that she would be happy to second this bill. So we are hoping that she gets re-elected, obviously.
Well, our message to Adelaide, for viewers in South Australia who are supportive of Glass-Steagall support Rebecca Sharkey's campaign, because if she gets back in, she will second the bill. Hopefully something else will have happened in the meantime, because as you've probably heard on the news, it's 9 weeks away, these by-elections. But we, the CEC, are happy to recommend people get behind Rebecca Sharkey's campaign to get re-elected into Parliament, because she's up against the very heart of the establishment of the Liberal Party and Alexander Downer's daughter, right? Yep. And they are no threat to the banks at all. They are the people the banks own. So do this, if you know, go and help the campaign, support the campaign, and it's good for, it would be good for Rebecca Sharkey to get re-elected.
Now, on the Royal Commission, I want to mention the fact that, you know, last year there was a big drumbeat about the concern that the Royal Commission would feed into our demands for breaking up the banks, because at the time, from August last year, we had been fighting hard to stop APRA being given emergency powers which would allow them to confiscate certain investments, bonds and potentially deposits. So this was on the radar. On the 21st of November in the Australian Financial Review, this is last year, there was an editorial, Conspiracy Theories Drive Bank Inquiry, which suggested that our campaign against bail-in had sparked support in Parliament for a Royal Commission into the banks. Then, just a few days later, on the 25th of November, AFR had another editorial decrying the fact that political scrutiny of the banks was being driven by the CEC. On the 13th of March this year, the AFR said that the Royal Commission was not designed to be an inquiry into how our entire successful banking industry has been structured, and nor must it become one. But they went on to say that the magnitude of the inquiry could set up the expectation of some radical overhaul of banking, such as a forced breakup of their activities. And even the Financial Review...
Well, Pauline Hanson turned up at the Royal Commission this week. We've been out there all the time, but there's no one like Pauline Hanson to draw the media. Anyway, what's interesting is they were around her like flies on you know what. That's what the media is like. When they covered her in the Financial Review, though, there was plenty of news that day, but for the Financial Review, it was front page news. One nation leader goes after the banks. That says less about Pauline Hanson and more about the Financial Review, right? And of course, this is their siege. They feel under siege. This is the bankers' paper. They feel under siege at the moment.
And One Nation had been the party that tried to put up legislation to specifically block the new APRA powers from confiscating deposits. So it's a big factor. Now we'll take a quick break, but we'll keep talking about this right after.
We've all seen this one time or another. We may even have done it ourselves. But inhaling balloon gas is very dangerous and can be fatal. The helium in balloon gas acts as an asphyxiant, and when you inhale, it displaces the oxygen in your lungs. Balloon gas is safe in balloons and when you release it in a well-ventilated area and in a safe manner. So the next time you see some sucker about to inhale balloon gas, or you think it's going to be a laugh, stop and be gas-wise.
Here are the current weather readings for Melbourne, Geelong and Shepparton on the MELfeed.video weather wall. It also includes tomorrow's forecast and expected minimum temperatures in these areas overnight. This is the MELfeed.video weather wall. We are currently looking for a sponsor. If you're interested, please email Michael at MELfeed.video for more details.
Welcome back to the CEC report, where we're discussing the battle lines in Canberra being drawn over the fight to break up the banks. And I'll just add to what we were discussing in the last segment that on the 2nd of May, the London Times, which we reported a couple of times on the show, had an article where they were in great conniptions over the fact that if breaking up the banks was successful here in Australia coming out of the Royal Commission, that the threat was that that would be back on the table in the United Kingdom and other places around the world. So the Royal Commission started its next round of hearings this Monday, just gone, and those hearings will focus in on business lending and rural lending. And one of the first, we want to just talk about a few of the different witnesses to again illustrate the crimes of the banks here. So one of the witnesses Monday was a lady by the name of Carolyn Flanagan, who was guarantor for her daughter's loan worth $50,000 from Westpac. Now she is legally blind, she's had several strokes, and she also suffers from a number of serious illnesses, and it was quite likely that she didn't know what she was signing up for. The bank in their records actually had no notes about any of her conditions or the obvious warning signs that she wasn't capable of repaying the loans if it ran into trouble, which it did. She lost her house, and despite pleas because of circumstances to be able to keep her house, etc., to deal with it, Westpac ignored all of this, and only after she lost her house and a process of dispute resolution did Westpac agree to allow her to stay there rent-free, meaning she doesn't own the house, but they're letting her stay there until she dies. So I just want to show a few clips here from Sunday night's 60 Minutes program called The Teller, which is about a bank teller explaining how they had quotas to sell bank products to their customers. And during that show, they showed a number of the victims of the bank speaking at the Royal Commission. So we'll just roll that clip.
The importance of these cases, Elisa, is they show that a lot of people think, yeah, the responsibility must be on the customer, surely, because why were they so foolish to sign up to this stuff? But and I'm sure there's plenty of foolishness on that side, and of course there was, but what they're up against is a predatory machine that preyed on people, right? And we have to deal with that. You can't change everything about human nature, but we can change that. That's what Glass-Steagall's about. We've got one more clip now, which is from also from 60 Minutes. This is John Darlson. He's a former director of the ANZ Bank. He's the former chairman of Woolworths. He's extraordinary. He's one of the fiercest critics of the current banking system in Australia. He gets a little bit of airplay, but nowhere near enough. And I was telling members of Parliament, he has some attachment to the National Party here in Victoria. I was telling members of Parliament in the National Party, you talk to him, and they had no clue because he's never been called to testify before these committees, etc. And you'll see why when you see what he's prepared to say as a former banker in this clip.
Now, this deep mistrust of the banks can be resolved. They had a similar situation after the 1929 crash and the Great Depression in the US. And the Pecora hearings, which investigated the crimes of the banks, as our Royal Commission is doing, played a critical element in shining light onto it in the first place, but then also making recommendations of how to prevent any interaction between bankers who had, dreams of massive profits even at their customers' expense, and separating that away from any relevant retail banking. Well, they changed the culture. Franklin Roosevelt was famous. He said, look, the principle has always been caveat emptor, let the buyer beware, what we were just talking about a second ago. He said, no, we have to change it to let the seller beware. And that was a cultural shift in the 1930s. It was inherent in the principle of Glass-Steagall. They set up the SEC and a whole bunch of other institutions. And in the deregulation era that we're on the tail end of now, that's all gone out the window, and it's back to let the buyer beware. Well, you're seeing in the Royal Commission here, we've got to go back to that change, and Glass-Steagall's the centre of it. Yeah. Now, I also want to add that internationally this is beginning to be picked up. In Italy, for instance, where you have a new government hopefully about to be ushered in, it's a coalition government, and between two parties, the Five Star Movement and the Lega Nord, the Northern League. And they have put together a contract so that they can agree on their policy platform. And in that contract are some very interesting items. It calls for a system in which the retail credit bank and the investment bank are separated, both as concerns their type of activity and as concerns supervision. It calls for a radical review of the bail-in regime. It calls for a national investment bank and for strengthening Italian sovereignty over the EU. Now, the Financial Times of London responded by saying the barbarians are not merely massing at the gates of Rome, they are inside the city walls. And quickly, Lisa, I saw just this morning, and I think it's the New York Times, forgive me, we'll find it and put it on the screen, an article where the headline is something to the effect that it's not the extremes of politics in the world at the moment, like extreme left, extreme right, that are anti-democratic. It's the centre. The centre is trying to resist the democratic force for change. Demands of the people. And this coalition is in Italy of the right and the left, right? It's driven by the people of Italy who have suffered excruciating pain at the hands of the EU bankers and that because of the austerity they've gone through. And right at the same time, the Vatican has just put out a document saying that financial derivatives are a ticking time bomb ready sooner or later to explode, poisoning the health of the markets, and jeopardising real economic growth. And they go on to say that the recent financial crisis might have provided the occasion to develop a new economy and a new regulation of financial activities that would neutralise predatory and speculative tendencies and acknowledge the value of the actual economy. Now, they fall short of calling for full Glass-Steagall banking regulation, but they do cautiously suggest some sort of separation of banking activities. So, it's coming up quite lawfully as a new global financial crisis is brewing. One of the things the Vatican specified about derivatives is that you're buying contracts where for you to benefit, you want other people to go bankrupt. Yeah, that's right. Right? And then why should those sorts of things exist in this world? Now, for first-time callers, you can contact us and get a free copy of this manual that we've just put out. It's a handbook on everything you need to know about Glass-Steagall and the accompanying policies that we've mentioned, such as national banking to get our economy going again. Now we'll take a quick break, and right after this we'll be talking about the North Korean situation.
Here are the current weather readings for Melbourne, Geelong and Shepparton on the MELfeed.video weather wall. It also includes tomorrow's forecast and expected minimum temperatures in these areas overnight. This is the MELfeed.video weather wall. We are currently looking for a sponsor. If you're interested, please email Michael at MELfeed.video for more details.
It's barbie season, so it's time for a barbecue safety check. Clean away any grease buildup. Swap systems assure that the bottle inspection is in date. The bottle should be upright and not hanging by the hose. And make sure your regulator and hose is undamaged, unblocked and unkinked. Check connections using soapy water. When done, turn off clockwise at the bottle first. A quick barbie and gas safety check always means a safe and enjoyable summer.
Australian women need to kiss more. Watch out for persistent and unusual symptoms, as they could be a sign of ovarian cancer. Know the important signs and symptoms. Kiss. Look out for symptoms like abdominal or back pain, difficulty eating or feeling full quickly, or persistent bloating, or a change in toilet habits. If you're experiencing persistent and unusual symptoms for more than 14 days, see a GP. Make sure you kiss regularly.
Welcome back to the CEC Report. We're now discussing the Libya model threat to North Korea means murder. So this morning on the news it was being reported across the country that US President Trump has cancelled the 12th June summit with North Korea. It may possibly be rescheduled, but at this point it appears it is off. Now this came after North Korea called the Vice President Mike Pence a political dummy and questioned the relevance of the summit going forward because of what the US, some leaders within the US government have been saying, and made further threats. So Trump was responding to that. But to give you the background of it, North Korea had every right to react in the way that they did. Last week, when they initially paused the talks with South Korea and made initial warnings about the breakdown of talks with the US, it was based on the comments of the National Security Advisor to Trump, John Bolton, who had compared the denuclearisation process to the Libya model of 2003-2004. And the North Korean First Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs responded, in a very clear-cut way to say, look, this undermines any negotiations for you to say this. Now, Trump actually came out contradicting Bolton, which was very good, because he said, look, our model's not the Libyan model. In Libya, he said, we decimated that country. If you look at that model with Gaddafi, that was total decimation. We went in there to beat him. Now, the thing is, Trump should have sacked Bolton, because in 2003, with the six-party talks, North Korea had actually demanded Bolton be excluded from any role in the talks because he'd made inflammatory comments about North Korea's alleged WMDs at that time. And his provocations were effective in derailing talks. Of course, Bolton had played a key role in presenting the evidence for the WMDs in Iraq as the basis for the illegal invasion of Iraq. Now, if that wasn't all bad enough, this Monday just gone, Vice President Mike Pence weighed into it. He referred to Bolton's comments and said that the Libyan model would only be applied if Kim Jong-un doesn't make a deal. But he brought that right back to the forefront, and North Korea responded by saying, look, that does not reflect the climate of détente that we want here.
So North Korea has, Trump said, okay, I'm scrapping this. The way his tone wasn't the worst, right? But he's responded to this. He's got too much bad advice here. The North Koreans have responded with a conciliatory tone, Elisa, saying, well, we are still prepared to meet at any time, right? They're not the ones that pulled the plug on this. The way the media is reporting this, though, it's that North Korea has derailed this with its threats, right? And Trump's letter sort of, made that claim. No. North Korea didn't make the threats. John Bolton and Mike Pence made the threats, because here's what it means, the Libyan model. When they say the Libyan model, it means we are going to go in there and kill Kim Jong-un, because that's what they did. They convinced Libya to give up its WMDs, and then they went in there and they killed him. But it wasn't just, you know, killed him because he might have deserved it anyway. No. So let me read you some material here. Basically, Hillary Clinton ran this operation, right? She was the Secretary of State at the time. There's all these emails between her and her advisor, Sidney Blumenthal, that were released in 2016 that gave away the chronology here and gave the game away quite a lot. And basically that was the excuse for Libya was a humanitarian intervention. Gaddafi's going to slaughter the people in Benghazi. 3 days after they first warned about Benghazi might be in danger, there were official emails saying, oh, it's all calmed down now, there's no problem. NATO planes started bombing it, and about 10 days later, Sidney Blumenthal saying to Hillary, well, actually the reason for this humanitarian intervention is now past, right? In other words, what are we doing? He wasn't saying what are we doing here, but he was admitting it's past. The bombing went on for 7 more months, and then at the end of which Gaddafi was not just murdered, he was brutally murdered. He was sodomized with a bayonet. Hillary Clinton was involved. There's emails to show she was involved in the US had a role in showing these Al-Qaeda Islamists where Gaddafi was so they could murder him. They wanted him dead, right? That's the Libya model. And then in 2016, the British House of Commons produced this report, Libya, Examination of Intervention and Collapse in the UK's Future Policy Options. And it says, this policy was not informed by accurate intelligence. In particular, the government failed to identify that the threat to civilians was overstated and that the rebels included a significant Islamist element. So that's it, and that basically says it's a fraud, right? But the end result was a dead leader of a nation and a failed state.
And watch this clip from Hillary Clinton to really let it sink in.
Yep.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
So when they say Libyan model, Lisa, it's a clear threat to North Korea.
Absolutely. Now, for more information, you can get a copy of our latest Australian Alert Service. This is our weekly publication. Give us a call to find out more. That's all we've got time for today. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks for tuning in, and join us again next week.
Okay, Sarah, I'm going to order some pathology tests to see how everything's going.
Half the Australian population had a pathology test last year. That's you or someone you love. 100 tests are performed every minute, delivering vital medical information. From the moment you are born, your healthcare depends on pathology tests. 70% of medical decisions rely on information from pathology tests. Pathology is the engine room of healthcare. One small sample can reveal millions of insights all about you. Pathologists are your doctor's doctor. 25,000 people work to provide doctors with the answers they need to treat you. Australian pathology is world class. We may never meet you, but we see each of you as part of our family. Every minute, 23 Australians find out more about their health.
Good news, Sarah. The results show that everything's okay.
Pathology provides peace of mind.
I rely on Australian pathology.
Sign up online to support Australian pathology.
MELfeed.video.
against the lights. say there's a chance I could die in a car crash. Maybe even from heart disease. Maybe even skin cancer.
I could die in a work-related accident, or I could die in a fight.
The fact is, the biggest cause of death for men in my age group is suicide.
Please don't let this happen to me.
You can do something. Lifeline believes that suicide is mostly preventable. Help us save lives. Find out what you can do at lifeline.org.au.
MELfeed Video is about to close operations for tonight, but we'll be back with you next Wednesday evening. In the meantime, here is a selection of programs that will be seen on our next scheduled web stream. You are welcome to visit our website at MELfeed.video for further details of this project. Until next time, from all of us at MELfeed Video, we wish you a very good night.